South Jersey's official play-by-play home of the Eagles, Sixers, and Flyers.
At 0 point would I ever consider not being a fan of the team.
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD, Millville, Atlantic City. A Town Square media station serving all of South Jersey.
Isn't it about time for somebody's favorite radio program? Yeah.
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
Now, live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Happy hour Friday starts now. The Sports Bash live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video, streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. What's up, everybody? Hope you're having a good happy hour Friday as we get you ready for a weekend that should be fun. Beautiful weather, supposed to be in the 60s this weekend. Looking forward to getting out and about. We got some happy hour Friday picks for you as well. Phillies in action today. Kind of a quiet night on the Philly landscape. No Flyers, no Sixers. Sixers and Flyers both play tomorrow. Phillies down in Clearwater today. They trail 3-0 against the Red Sox, but we got some news and updates on that. We'll talk to Mike McGarry at the bottom of the hour. A couple of Phil's things on our mind there, including the debut of Jesus Luzardo. We'll fill you in on how he looked here in just a little bit. But we start on a Friday with the NFL Combine underway. The scoops are starting, and earlier in the week we talked about a ESPN reporter, Jeremy Fowler, who basically suggested the Eagles had interest in Myles Garrett and that they would basically put a package together that would be too hard to say no to, right? So Fowler comes out and says, hey, Howie Roseman will put a package together that will be too much for Cleveland to say no to. Okay. And I thought the big part of that was when Jeremy Fowler suggested that the Eagles were thought to be a very aggressive team on the trade market this offseason. Okay, I'm playing along. I'm hanging out. I'm paying attention. Now, Diana Russini, formerly of ESPN, now with The Athletic, on the Scoop City podcast. She does the podcast along with former Eagles quarterback Chase Daniel, who was a backup quarterback here during the Doug Peterson era. Russini says that Roseman could, quote, make a big swing for Myles Garrett, and that's where we start today's show. Here is what basically Diana Russini, when she looks at this whole thing, she believes that Roseman could make a swing for the star pass rusher here. Now, it all kind of culminates with the big thing here. They were discussing the possibility of Zach Bond and his future. All right, so this kind of starts with the conversation of Russini saying there's a lot of teams in on Zach Bond. Take a listen.
There are a lot of teams in on Zach Bond. I think he's going to be expensive for Philadelphia if they want to do it. I just think they may get outpriced there. So we'll see how that comes together.
So she says she thinks there's a lot of teams in on Zach Bond, and that ultimately the Eagles might become outpriced in the situation. So they want Bond to come back, but they might get outpriced here. And that is one thing that we've kind of talked about. Which team comes in, knocks your socks off? Because we were wondering about Bond. Would other teams say, is the linebacker position like the running back position in the past, where people don't want to spend money on that position, and then they spent money on running back last year, you win the Super Bowl. Now you had Zach Bond have an all-pro season, and now we want to spend money on that position too. There's a lot here, so stick around and keep with me here, because she just said the Eagles might get outpriced on Zach Bond, but if that happens, what's the domino effect that Howie Roseman he might let some of these guys walk, but then what?
I would be surprised if Milton Williams stayed. It could happen, but I think they're going to make an effort here. But here's what some people are saying right now, that Howie's willing to move on from some of these guys because he's looking to make a big swing and take a big swing. And that big swing would be for Myles Garrett.
That's the Scoop City Podcast, NFL insider Diana Russini. Yeah, okay, I can let Milton Williams walk. I can let Josh Sweat walk. I might even be able to let Zach Bond walk if I want to take a big swing for Myles Garrett. That's not all, because there's a possibility that it comes down to which guy do you want, Bond or Garrett, and Diana Russini and her co-host Chase Daniel discussed that possibility.
Some of these guys that you think are a sure thing may not be sure things.
I'm in.
Philly,
I would rather have Myles Garrett than Zach Bond.
Well, he
right?
needs some assets, right?
Zach Bond's making $13 to $15 million a year, or whatever the top salary for a linebacker is. Yeah.
Needs some assets, needs some money. So we'll see. Would you put it past Howie Roseman going after Myles Garrett? No way.
Not.
I wouldn't put it past Howie Roseman to go after him. No way. I agree with her. But would you take Myles Garrett, with the caveat is you have to let Zach Bond walk? That becomes part of the equation here. 609-403-0973. So let's play this back. 1, the Eagles might get outpriced on Zach Bond. 2, they might let Milton Williams and Josh Sweat and might get outpriced on Zach Bond in order to make a big swing for a player like Myles Garrett. They might have to make the decision, do we want to get Garrett or keep Bond, who might get overpaid? These are all the big stories right now that are going on in the combine world, but also Howie Roseman's mind. Roseman's got the chess match here of what's more important to me, going to get Zach Bond and bringing him back here, or I might have to let those 3 guys walk, but I'm reinforcing my defensive front with maybe the best edge rusher in all of football. That's a tough one to have to choose between, right? You have to choose between a guy who's been here, that your defensive coordinator handpicked, Zach Bond, in order to, by the way, the reports that are out there, according to Diana Russini, is also that Myles Garrett's going to want a new deal. So you're going to have to also think about that when he potentially gets traded here. He gets traded here, and then he wants a new deal. Here's Diana Russini and Chase Daniel answering the questions about what a trade for Myles Garrett might actually look like.
So say Myles Garrett gets traded. What does trade compensation look like from the team trading for him in terms of just like pure picks having to give up?
Let's just look at the Khalil Mack trade, right? It was 2 1s, 3, and a 6. They had a second round and 5th round that pick that they gave back, but I don't think it's going to be
not
that
2
big.
1s, right?
No, that's too much. I don't think it's going to be that much.
But definitely a 1 in there.
Definitely.
So she said not 2 1s, but definitely a 1. So I think most people out there listening would sign up for that in a heartbeat, right? You don't have to give up 2-1, just one first-round pick, and it's number 32. Okay, I think we all sign up for that. But the big thing when you take a look at that is she also mentioned in there, quote, they're definitely going to have to do a new deal, and he wants to be the highest paid player at that position. That is what she started that part of the podcast with. So you trade for Myles Garrett, you also have to then think about redoing the deal. So there's a lot of moving parts with this whole situation. But I think the moral of this story becomes this is more real than I think people want to believe, because Myles Garrett came out yesterday and says he does not want a new deal with the Cleveland Browns. The Browns have made him, have insinuated they want to bring him back, offer, and he is saying, I do not want to come back here. Like, I think Myles Garrett is getting to the point where he's telling them, it doesn't matter what you give me. He is not open to a contract extension with the Browns. That, according to Mary Kay Cabot, who's covered the Browns essentially my whole life. So, according to Mary Kay Cabot, Garrett has, quote, slammed the door on the possibility with an extension to remain with the Browns. So what do the Browns do in this situation? And if you're a rival team, do you lowball them? Do you say, hey, he doesn't want to sign an extension, he doesn't want to play here, we're only going to give you this? Or if you're Howie Roseman, he knows Andrew Berry. Andrew Berry knows Roseman. I don't know that that helps or hurts the whole situation. But does he try to lowball him and just say, hey, listen, man, you're not getting anything else. Help a brother out over here. I made you. I got you that position. You worked here before. And it's not going to be you that wins a Super Bowl. It might as well be me. Let's do it again. Andrew Berry, make it happen. 609-403-0973. Text board is open. Couple other quickies here. Diana Russini says, the Eagles' plan this offseason is they want to keep building the defensive line, but will the Browns acquiesce?
What they want to do is continue to build and build and build in the areas that got them to the Super Bowl and in the Super Bowl's past, which is
Jalen
to
Carter
continue building.
and Myles Garrett.
Could you imagine that? Wow. Look, but is Cleveland going to move him? At the end of the day, it's going to come down to that. And Myles Garrett is not open to negotiating with the Browns on a new contract.
That's the key right there. He doesn't want to talk to them at all. He doesn't want to go back to Cleveland. Now what happens with the Browns? What do they do? That's where we start today's show. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. You guys heard everything that was mapped out there. What is your overview now? Do you think Garrett's a possibility? Do you want Garrett? Do you want to give up a first-round pick to get Garrett? What are you guys thinking out there? That's where we start.
Mike, I think Garrett's a possibility because he doesn't want to be there. But as Diana Rossini said, are the Browns going to be willing to not just make a deal, but make a deal in good faith? Because part of the problem in all of this is if you trade Garrett, it's going to be a negative for the Browns and their salary cap. Well, you have to negotiate a new deal to make it easier to trade him. But Garrett says, why should I make a deal with you if you're not going to trade me? So it's kind of like a chicken or the egg situation, right?
Well, listen, you're in a tough spot for the team. The Browns are in a tough spot because he's saying, I don't care what, I don't even want to listen to you. I don't even want to be blown away by your offer.
Right.
Like they could say, hey, we're going to give you a $300 million deal, which obviously wouldn't happen, but hey, we're going to give you a $300 million deal. He doesn't even want to hear what they had to say. It's almost like my mind is made up. I am checked out of here. Don't make me have to rethink this. So he doesn't want to hear what they had to say. Well, the Browns are saying, well, we don't want to trade you. So this stare down happens. At some point, you're the Browns. You're 3-14. You haven't been relevant in my lifetime, the second incarnation of the Browns. You have to then move on and say, look, this guy's 30 years old. He's been a great Cleveland Brown. Do we really want to spend money on a guy who doesn't even want to be here,
right,
who we haven't won with anyway? And that's not a knock on him. It just, We have to prioritize something else in this franchise. The problem is they're so anchored down by the Watson contract. Do they really want to pay another contract to a guy who doesn't want to be there? I mean, to me, if I'm Andrew Berry and the Cleveland Browns front office, I got to look at myself in the mirror and say, listen, it is time to start over. Let him move. What can I get for him? And just try to start this thing moving back in the right direction.
If I can backtrack to the other point that they made as well, which I thought was interesting, she talked about the idea of potentially having to choose Garrett over Bond. And my question would be, Howie made me willing to do that, but how would Vic Fangio feel about that? Because a lot of Vic Fangio's scheme is built on the idea of having competent linebackers.
Yeah, I know that. Listen, TJ Edwards got $8 million, and that was too much for Howie to sign.
At the time, yeah.
There are reports out there that Bond will get upwards of $15 million a year. Somebody texted in. Bond is going to cost 3 years, $35 million or so. That's in about the $10 million range. Probably even a little bit more than that, I would imagine, is what the initial numbers have sounded like. So, and as Diana Russini just pointed out on the podcast, he has a lot of suitors,
Right,
which
he's gonna
does
have-
what?
right.
Drives the price up.
Yep.
So if that price starts to get out of the Eagles, like $10 million might be a number that they feel comfortable with, right?
Well, that's where maybe you don't let him get to the market. Maybe you try to get out in front of this and be like, look, we want you back, but you got to come back on our terms. Like, we'll give you a contract and we're going to pay you, but we're going to pay you in a way that's not going to be a negative to our salary cap. Like, we'll front you a bunch of this money on the signing bonus, for example.
I know it's Happy Hour Friday, but it seems like people have started early. Send the Browns Bryce Huff and lowball picks.
You got to be kidding.
Yeah, Bryce Huff will get the deal done for Myles Garrett.
Bryce Huff is not getting me a sandwich right now.
No, and lowball picks aren't getting it done either. You heard what she said, by the way, and I agree with her. 1 first-round pick. So lowball picks isn't getting it done. A first-round pick and Bryce Huff, I don't even think they have – I don't think anybody has any interest in Bryce Huff, to be honest with you. Now, there's 2 teams that we talked about last week that could have some interest in Bryce Huff. One was San Francisco, where Robert Saleh is the defensive coordinator. He was the head coach in New York when Huff had his best season. And Jeff Albrecht is the defensive coordinator with the Falcons. He was the defensive coordinator when Saleh was the head coach. So they both have some relationship with him and can vouch for, hey, this guy can play for us. He played fine, but I don't think Bryce Huff is coming off the season he just had. I don't think that's sweetening the pot for anybody.
The way it works in the NFL is when you have these kind of contracts, you got to pay the other team something of value to take on the contract. So, like, for example, remember Brock Osweiler, they had to give the Browns and the Houston Texans a second-round pick to take on his contract.
Yeah, listen, the one thing, too, is generally in the NFL, player for a player of this magnitude doesn't work out, or is not the way these things are structured.
Well,
now,
also, you don't need to match the numbers exactly.
you don't have to match the salaries, right? But you're not usually trading a disgruntled player for another disgruntled player.
Right.
You know, if they want to just take him, but why would Cleveland say, hey, we'll take that bad contract off your hands?
Right. What purpose or what value would it be to Cleveland?
None. No value to Cleveland to take Bryce Huff. Unless, listen, I don't know Cleveland's coaching staff. Jim Schwartz is the defensive coordinator. So maybe he looks at Bryce Huff as a fit for him. So that could be a possibility if Jim Schwartz says, hey, that guy could really help me. I could use that. But why would they want to pay him that contract coming off the year he just had?
Right.
I can't see that happening. And lowball picks, that's not getting it done either.
That's insulting.
Yeah. If you're saying Huff and lowball picks, you're making it as if Huff is the caveat, is the main portion of that, and then just throw him some low. It starts with that pick number 32.
That's a bad job by that texter.
That's where it starts. It starts with pick 32. The next part of it is there a guy on the Eagle roster that Cleveland values? Is there a younger player, Nolan Smith, Jalix Hunt, somebody to that level that they say, hey, we'll give you Garrett, but we want one of your young players back in return? I think that would be something. Now, what Diana Russini said, what would it take? She went to the Khalil Mack deal. 2 1s, a 3, and a 6. 2 1s, she said, I don't think it's going to be 2 1s. So how about 1 1, a 3 and a 6.
Or what if you say, hey, Jalen Hunt was a 3rd-round pick, and maybe you say, we'll give you a 1 Hunt and a 5.
If you're involving a player. But
Right,
I would go the route of 1, 32, 3, and 6.
So you're going just straight picks.
I have no problem with that deal.
Okay.
Do you?
I think it might be a better sweetener for Cleveland if you give them a player that's at least showing them something, because picks are like lottery, like you're like rolling the dice. Whereas, like, look, hey, this kid Jalen Hunt, he had a solid rookie year for us in a part-time role.
Bad teams like picks.
That's true.
Pick 32, Slay, and maybe another pick. Slay's a free agent. You can't trade him.
Slay actually is a player option. He's under contract for next year.
Oh, that's right. He's under contract, but he says he only wants to play in Philly or Detroit.
Right.
So if you trade him to Cleveland,
He ain't
I would
gonna show
imagine
up.
he ain't going to show up.
He's gonna be a holdout.
Yeah, he'd hold out, and that trade would probably that's not happening. Pick 32, Slay, and maybe another pick. Take Slay out and replace him with another player. It's got to be a player of significance. It can't be a 34-year-old corner. You're talking about Cleveland here. They need young players and young talent. So you can't get a situation where I'm saying, here, take my oldest defensive player that I have. I know everybody wants to win the deal. So does Howie Roseman. But they also have to be realistic deals. This isn't John Madden football. You can't just override the computer to make a trade here.
So I just looked up the Khalil Mack trade, Mike. So I'm reading through the picks that were moved. And so the picks that were moved were all in either the 2020 or 2019 draft. So you could, I'm just saying you could, do what the Eagles have done in the past, which is, hey, we'll offer you the 1st-round pick this year, but we'll give you a 3rd-round pick from next year. Like, you could stagger these picks so it's not as detrimental all from one draft.
I could also see a scenario where Howie puts some contingencies on the pick. If there's a player involved, snaps, how many much like he did with Reddick.
Hassan Reddick, yeah.
Typically something set up to that. Or if there is no player involved, it could be based on what Garrett does.
Right, like we need Garrett to at least play X number of games.
Right, if Garrett gets 10 sacks, it's a 3rd-round pick. If he gets 12 or more, it goes to a 2nd-round pick.
Right.
Something to that effect. So there's incentive for Garrett to play better for your team, and it's also incentivized for the Browns who are giving him up that if he plays well for you, we get a better pick. Something to that effect.
And that way you're kind of giving Andrew Berry an opportunity to also save face and say, hey, if Garrett goes out and plays the way we think he can, we're going to get a really good pick out of this.
609-403-0973. I think the other, top of that whole discussion of all the audio bites we just played there, the fact that Zach Bond has a lot of interest, I find to be interesting because my thought process, we'll talk to John McMullen at 3 o'clock today. I was wondering if teams were going to have interest in Bond, or were they going to say he was only this level of player because of the fact that he was in the right situation. Like if he comes to our situation, he's not going to be the same player.
Right.
He's also, keep in mind, Zach Bond, for the people out there
He's
who
in his
are
late
like,
20s,
right,
isn't
he's never really played defense. He's been a special teams player, but he is 28 years old. Not old, but at the same time, you're not getting a 25-year-old guy and then you have him for the next 5 years. You're getting a guy at the back end, but 28 still young enough that I think he gets like a 3-year deal. But we'll talk to McMullen about where he thinks that number starts, and that's coming up in about a half an hour from now. The other part of that, so, okay, there's a big trade, a big interest in Zach Bond, and that someone could price you out of that. And if that means he walks out the door, how do you even replace him?
And remember, Nakobe Dean probably not playing the first half of next year either.
Good chance he doesn't play at least week 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe the first quarter of the season. Oren Burks is also a free agent.
Older player, though. He's older than Bond.
I don't find it to be crazy that the Eagles have report interest in Myles Garrett. I have maintained, I actually said this back at the Super Bowl. I think Howie Roseman, I keep comparing it to the Dodgers, but I think he's trying to really leave a legacy here. really hammer home that not only did we win one, because think about this. Philadelphia beat the Rams, who just, by the way, agreed to an extension to bring Matthew Stafford back. So that whole Rams thing that looked like Stafford could leave, he's not leaving now. That Rams team is a young team, right? That's a young team. They're building. So they're probably going to be right there with you again. Detroit had a ton of injuries last year. I don't know that you beat Detroit in an NFC championship game if they're at full strength. Washington, I know they weren't ready last year. Do you think they're going to rest on their laurels and just come back happy-go-lucky the same way? No, they're going to spend money. You've got to get better than the team that just won because, like it or not, you had a couple of paths that were a little different than you envisioned. You had all year long, it was Philly and Detroit, Philly and Detroit, Philly and Detroit, and then Detroit just lost player after player after player after player to the point that they just couldn't compete anymore. So you got a little bit of a road that you didn't expect and took advantage of it. Kudos to the Eagles for that.
To your point, I wanted to remind people what Howie Roseman said on NBC Sports about, because you mentioned how they're trying to keep building. They don't want to have to hit that reboot button. Here's Howie Roseman on PFT on NBC Sports.
The job is to continue to try to compete at the highest level. You know, right now our goal is to be as good as we possibly can be in 2025, but we also got to look at the big picture. We can't be in a situation where we're falling back so much that we have to start from scratch. So I think that's always kind of the knot in your stomach is trying to continue to bring talented players to your team.
Yeah, continue to bring talented players to your team. The big thing will be, what do you have to give up to get them? Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Watch the show live on the YouTube, at Mike Gill Show, on the X platform, formerly Twitter, at Mike Gill Show. We're just starting things off. Phillies in action today. Jesus Luzardo made his Phillies debut today. How did it go? Well, stick around. I'll tell you next on the Sports Bash Live. Happy Hour Friday, and I got some picks for you guys out there. Yeah, I was out and about last weekend coming up with some new spots for the Happy Hour Friday. That's all still to come here on the Sports Bash. 2:32, happy hour Friday, everybody. What's going on? I'm Mike Gill. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City set to join us in just a second. The Phillies in action today. 4-1, they trail Boston. That is in Grapefruit League play. But the bigger story was Jesus Luzardo made his first start for the Phillies today. Here are the numbers. 2 innings, 2 strikeouts. Reportedly was hitting 97-98 on the gun. And that is some big news. I want to kind of get into his story and his season and how they're going to figure this all out. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com, joins me right now on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN on this Happy Hour Friday. Michael, what's up, buddy?
Hey, how are you? Doing well here.
All right, so this trade for Luzardo back in December, obviously people looked at it and said, wow, they have a lot of pitching. They get another guy here, and he throws well today, and a lot of people hoping that he bounces back. I guess the question becomes, what do you see from this rotation now? Luzardo, Suarez, Sanchez, Nola, Wheeler, and then you got Painter waiting in the wings. How does I know health is a question. Let's just assume everybody kind of makes it to the All-Star break, and then there's Andrew Painter kind of looking through the window and saying, well, all 5 guys, like last year at the All-Star break, those 5 guys could have all made the All-Star game for the most part, other than Walker, 4 of the 5. What if all 5 guys are pitching really well? Painter's hanging around. Does somebody go to the bullpen? Does someone get traded? Because I thought Luzardo threw really well today. That was encouraging. So it got me thinking, what if he pitches well this year?
Yeah, well, the Phillies house, the foundation of the Phillies house is this starting rotation, and there's no doubt that this starting rotation could be one of the best in baseball, if not the best in baseball. Luzardo is a tremendously talented pitcher. A lot of upside. I saw him pitch a lot with the Marlins. We saw him pitch in the wild card round. I forget what year it was, maybe 23 or 24, probably 23. He started a game in Citizens Bank Park. He has fantastic stuff. The question is, can he stay healthy? He's coming off an injury, but if he stays healthy, his upside and what he will do to the rotation is outstanding. And he's like a lot of the offseason additions that the Phillies brought in. Jordan Romano, Max Kepler, they're all coming off injuries, bumps and bruises. If they stay healthy, we might be sitting back at the All-Star break or August or September saying Dave Dombrowski had a pretty good offseason. Remember when people were saying the Phillies did enough? Turns out they did enough and did a good job, but a lot of that is predicated on the health of those 3 guys, and none more has had health issues than Luzardo. So if he can stay healthy, Mike, he's better than a number 4 or 5 starter. He's a guy that in a lot of rotations could be a number 2 or a number 3 guy.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. The way I saw him throw today, I'm thinking to myself, man, this guy's throwing 97, 98. He looks like a top of the rotation guy, because then you get to the playoffs. You get to the playoffs, Mike, and it's like usually there's 4 guys. Which of the guys gets bounced? And then if Painter injects himself in there and he throws really well. So is there a guy in there that has set up or back end of the bullpen stuff? Does that where Painter, do they look at him and say, hey, we don't want to use you in a lot of innings, maybe 1 or 2 innings at a time? Do you see Painter being a possibility in that role? Is that where Suarez is probably destined for? Is somebody like Suarez, who's a free agent, do they look to use him to get that bat at the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds, right? But I think you're right. Painter with his innings limit, is he a guy that maybe you can piggyback with another guy? So you start a guy, maybe a Joe Ross, for instance, if somebody's banged up, and you throw Ross for 3 or 4 innings, and then you can piggyback him with Painter for 3 or 4 innings. And you mentioned Ranger Suarez. He's kind of the forgotten guy in this rotation. We know about Wheeler, who pitched great yesterday. We know about Nola. Luzardo turned some heads today. Christopher Sanchez has put on a lot of pounds, looks even better than he did last season. Suarez, who was arguably the best pitcher in baseball in April, May, and the first week of June last year before he kind of fell apart for whatever the reason is. He's been a forgotten guy. He's in a contract year. He's hired Scott Boras as his agent. people who hire Scott Boras as their agent going into contract years more often than not have big contract years. And Suarez's strength, as you pointed out, is his versatility, his ability to close games, his ability to come in maybe if the starter got knocked around early. So I'm sure the Phillies would love to get to October and have a problem of we've got 5 or 6 or 7 guys here that could start a playoff game. Who are the 4 we're going to pick, and what are we going to do with the other 3? They'd sign on the dotted line for that right now on February 28th.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I find it fascinating because, a lot of people, Luzardo, he pitched for the Marlins who didn't get a lot of fanfare. But, a couple of years ago, you're right, he pitched in that game against the Phillies at Citizens Bank Park in the wild card game. And, you throw another guy in there. 2 years ago in Miami, this is a guy who had a 3.58 ERA, 208 strikeouts in 178 innings. This guy's got an electric arm, electric stuff. So if you're saying, hey, he might be one of our top 3, what does that mean for Sanchez? And then you got Painter and Suarez. This is where they might have let some of those bullpen pieces walk or, move on, thinking our bullpen come playoff time might add an arm or 2 that we don't have through the 162.
Yeah, I honestly think their bullpen is kind of deep enough right now. I know they let some guys walk. Boy, that you look at the deal that Hoffman signed. I don't know if I'm giving him that sort of contract there. And I know the bullpen kind of went south in the playoffs the last 2 seasons. But here's the other thing. I think they really like Orion Kirkring. I think if you look at Kirkring, the second half of the season last year was outstanding. And what really was his rookie year. And I think they're looking at a guy like Kirkring who can be a major back piece in that back end and actually close games for them. And you combine him with Romano, with Matt Strahm, with Jose Alvarado, who threw over 100 miles an hour yesterday. You've got a pretty good bullpen. And again, bullpen guys are always available around that trade deadline. So you can go get a piece to bolster that bullpen. And I think, they were smart to sort of keep their powder dry, so to speak, in the offseason and maybe wait and see where they are around that trade deadline. Because you can always go out and get bullpen guys around the trade deadline.
All right, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. Phillies in action today. Interesting, by the way, Turner, Harper, Bohm, Castellanos. No Schwarber in the lineup today, so I don't know if you read much into that. But that's the first time we've seen them write Harper's name into the number 2 hole. I also found it interesting, and you can't read a lot into these lineups, but Kepler in the 5 hole ahead of Stott, who was in the 7 hole today. So it was Kepler, Real Muto, Stott. Do you like Stott or Kepler in that? I guess they would be in the 6 hole behind Castellanos normally.
Yeah, I mean, either way, I don't have an issue with. I might put Stott down towards the bottom of that lineup and hit Kepler 6, only because Stott can kind of act as like maybe a second sort of leadoff guy if he's hitting 8th and turn that lineup over, turn that lineup over and get it through, back to the leadoff spot there. I don't have an issue either way. But here's what I'll say. If you have Max Kepler or Bryson Stott hitting 8th in your lineup, you have a pretty deep lineup. That's a pretty good lineup if you got Max Kepler or Bryson Stott hitting 8th in it. And to me, Mike, I was looking online today. The thing that I saw that was very interesting when it comes to the Phillies lineup is the number of guys they have over the age of 30 now. This lineup is predominantly over the age of 30, and it just drives home to be more the case that health is going to be key this season. The team in the National League East, the Mets, the Braves, the Phillies, the team that avoids injuries, and so far it's the Mets who have been hit hard by injuries, pitching injuries in particular so far in spring training. The team that avoids injuries is probably going to come out of that division because I think all 3 teams are very talented. And just looking at that Phillies lineup today and seeing a bunch of guys in their early 30s, boy, I in my own mind it flashed to my head, and I'd be interested to hear what you think. Is it realistic to say that all these guys are going to be healthy for the entire season, and not one of these guys, 2-3 of these guys is not going to miss a lot of time? I don't know if that's going to be the case this year.
Well, and, interesting enough, I don't know that anybody of this group had like a all-star or nobody had a career type of year. So do any of these guys, Turner, Harper, Castellanos, Real Muto, take a step back from what they were last year? Because none of them were great last year. You could say Harper was pretty good. Turner was solid, not what you're expecting. Castellanos really struggled. Then he got, but if one of those guys or two of those guys take a step back as opposed to stay where they were or took a step forward, what does that mean for this lineup?
Yeah, I think that Schwarber was a guy last year that kind of took a step forward for me as a hitter in his time as Philadelphia for his ability not only to hit home runs, but get on base and put the ball in play more. I thought he had a better year. But you're exactly right. These guys are 32, 33. In Realmuto's case, I believe 34 years old. And it's interesting to see, do they have that career year left in them? Does Bryce Harper have a career year left in him? Does Trey Turner have a career year left in him? Or have they started to go down the mountain now a little bit? Not to say that they're shells of themselves, but have we seen the best of them? I just think it's an interesting question.
You're right.
And I think it drives home the fact of this might be the last go around for this group. It's not. I don't think it's the last go around for the Phillies as contenders. I think there's young talent there. There's still young talent on the team. But for this core that we've seen that emerged, with that great playoff run and getting to the World Series against the Astros, this could be the last roundup for the core of that group.
I agree, Mike. Somebody asked me the other day, if you are Rob Thompson, it's the first day of spring training, what's your message to this team that has been to the World Series, then to the Championship Series, then lost to the Division Series, much like the 09, 10, 11. They kept going one round backwards, and the message has to be, it's now or never for you guys. If you like this group of guys and you like turning your heads around and seeing each other, you better win it this year, because if not, there's going to be changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, obviously, Bryce Harper and Trey Turner are going to be here after this season. But is JT Realmuto going to be here? Is Nick Castellanos going to be here? Is Kyle Schwarber going to be here? Is Ranger Suarez going to be here? So, yeah, I agree with you. This group has sort of established itself, and they've kind of been in our summer lives for the last 3 or 4 years. Well, this could be it for this group, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I still think if they stay healthy, they're an outstanding baseball team. And again, I stick back to my comment I made earlier. I think if Kepler, Romano, and Luzardo stay healthy, we're going to look back in September and say, we were all moaning the Phillies didn't do this in the offseason, the Phillies didn't do that. Well, Dombrowski showed why he's a Hall of Fame GM with what he did this offseason. But He gambled. We'll see if it pays off.
Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. Let's flip over to the football real quick. Diana Russini from The Athletic says, there are a lot of teams in on Zach Bond. He's going to be expensive for Philadelphia. If they want to do it, I think they might get outpriced there. I think they're going to make an effort, but here's what some people are saying right now, that Howie is willing to move on from some of these guys, and she's talking about Sweat, Milton, Williams, and Zach Bond, because he's looking to make a big swing and take a big swing, and that big swing would be Myles Garrett. So we've been talking a little bit about him, and it's like, is this real? Can it happen? Well, Garrett said yesterday he is not even willing to listen to Cleveland and talk about an extension. You're hearing all the smoke, but will the fire start with Myles Garrett and Howie Roseman?
Yeah, interesting. I think the Braun case is very interesting because it shows you, at the end of the day, he had a great season, but he still plays linebacker, right? And we all know what the Eagles think about linebackers. So are they willing to prioritize that position with a lot of money? Going to be fascinating to see. The other thing to watch with the Eagles right now, the toughest thing to do when you have a team that's won a championship and you have guys that have bled for you out on that football field and guys who have given their body for you and guys who have sacrificed their health to get you a Super Bowl championship. The toughest thing to do is say goodbye to those guys. Remember, the Patriots did it early on. Lawyer Malloy, they got rid of those guys. Richard Seymour, they got rid of those guys. They walked away from those guys. Is Howie and the Eagles going to be able to walk away from those guys? And again, I know Myles Garrett is a tremendous football player. I'd have to see what they gave up. But, Mike, I just think, if I'm the Eagles, I don't know if I make the move for him rather than just get instead of getting one Myles Garrett, maybe you get 2 or 3 other guys or 4 other guys that can sort of supplement the core and the base of the team. I don't know if this team needs a Myles Garrett, but what they might need is 3 or 4 more guys to sort of supplement that core, complement that core, and help the young players grow and keep this success going. It'll be fascinating to watch how Howie, sort of answers those questions this offseason.
No doubt about it. And we know how he likes to swing and swing big. That would be a massive swing. Mike McGarry, the Press of Atlantic City, at AC Press McGarry on the X platform. And, of course, kind enough to join us here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Mike, have a good weekend, man.
All right, you too. Everybody out there, have a good weekend, and we'll see you down the road. Thank you very much.
Mike's back on Monday, and you can read him at pressofatlanticcity.com. And, of course, you can follow him on the X platform at AC Press McGarry. All the high school sports stuff going on, his columns and more, and here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, coming up at 3 o'clock, John McMullen on the Myles Garrett. What about some of the other stuff that's a possibility? Zach Bond, will he be priced out? Stick around. McMullen at 3. All right, 253 Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. Did you see this story about J.J. Watt, that he might come back and play for the Bengals, and why he might come back?
I know he has joked on the McAfee show about, I'm staying in shape just in case. You never know. And McAfee always just says, yeah, right.
So apparently he has ownership in a soccer team somewhere.
Yeah, an FCS team.
He had a bet with the goalkeeper that if he basically threw a shutout the rest of the season from the point on,
right,
that he would come out of retirement to play for goalkeeper James Trafford's favorite team that happens to be the Cincinnati Bengals. Well, Trafford did not give up a goal the rest of the season. And now Watt apparently may have to live up his end of the bargain.
Now, does Watt go to the Bengals and offer a discount to come back?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, does he go back and say, hey, I mean, he hasn't played 2 years, J.J. Watt.
But, I mean, that guy, he's a freak. I mean, I feel like he could go out there.
Did he retire, though, because he just was kind of at the end of the road, or because he kept getting hurt?
He retired because he said that, he was tired of putting in the work that it took to get his body ready every year.
Well, it's been out 2 years. Will J.J. Watt be back with the Bengals? Because on February 13th, they put out a picture with him and the goalie with Watt in a Bengals jersey, and the goalie has not given up a goal. He did not give up a goal from that point forward. So will Watt live up his end of the bet? Another offseason story has emerged. By the way, Watt was on the Dan Patrick Show this week, says he'll be happy to play for the Bengals if the streak continues. McMullen coming up next.
Myles Garrett.
That was Diana Russini on the Scoop City podcast. That Howie is ready to move on from some of these guys, John McMullen, because he wants to take a big swing, and that big swing would be for Myles Garrett. You know it's not going to go away, but is there any validity in your eyes to the potential of making a big swing such as Myles Garrett?
Yeah, there's some. I mean, Howie likes to make splashes, obviously, and this is a difference-making player. This is, sort of a Saquon Barkley for the defensive side of the ball. So he's always willing. And, it's funny because, Andrew Berry, who used to work here before he got the GM job back in Cleveland, one of the quotes he had up in his office was about Howie saying you got to make bold decisions that could get you fired to win at the highest level. And that's sort of his belief, and that's Jeffrey Lurie's belief. So that's why the Eagles are always involved in these conversations. But this is a player they love. I know that for a fact. I mean, and everyone does. It's hard not to like Myles Garrett as a player. But the idea of moving on from, Milton Williams and Josh Sweat and even Zach Bond, which I don't think is going to happen, but that has more to do with the normal range of business than I think Myles Garrett. If Cleveland still says they're not trading him, and until that changes, then I think the mindset changes a little bit. But I don't think upcoming free agency means has much to do with Myles Garrett when it comes to other decisions.
Yeah, I mean, part of the other, conversations he's having is, look, there's a lot of teams in on Zach Bond, and he's going to be too expensive. Not that Philly doesn't want him, but he might price himself out here. Are you surprised? We talked a little bit about this on your show, is what's the market for Zach Bond? She says, I think they may get outpriced here. And then if Bond walks, basically they'll replace him with a player, not at the same position, but an impact player someplace else, such as Myles Garrett.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles always have walkaway numbers. They've had it in the past. Last year they had it with Xavier McKinney. They really wanted him badly, and it just got too expensive. A couple of years prior with Marcus Williams, they wanted him, and it got too pricey. So they always have that walkaway number. I do know they're trying to sign Zach Bond before March 12th, so we'll see if he wants to bet on himself. They could get priced out of the market. It's an interesting conversation because I don't think anyone looks at him and says he's going to surpass Roquan Smith or Fred Warner at the top of the market. But, there's a lot of range from, say, $15 million to $20 million. And how far are the Eagles willing to go at that particular position? It's interesting, but I do know he's their top priority of the free agents they do have, the in-house free agents.
Right. You take a look at a guy like Zach Bond, and a couple of years ago when they had T.J. Edwards, what did he get? Somewhere between $7 and $8 million. You would imagine. Do you think Bond gets more than that? Is he in the $10 million range, or is that number not even enough?
No, that number's not even enough. I can't. The floor is 13.3, somewhere in that range, and then upwards to 15, 16, 17. I think the Eagles would go as high as 15. I don't know if they'd go higher than that.
John McMullen, Birds 365, weekday mornings, 8 a.m. on the Jacob Media YouTube channel, Sports Illustrated. So a lot of teams potentially in on Bond. Could he outprice himself? Hey, take a big swing and possibly get Myles Garrett there. You mentioned Cleveland. What's their situation here? They don't want to move him, but he's come out yesterday and said, I don't even want to listen to you. It's almost as if he's like, I don't even want you to try to make me think about coming back. So is Cleveland in a tough spot here? Is this a place where you can maybe get him at a cheaper price because he doesn't want to be there? What's the Cleveland situation here?
Well, he's under contract, and they could play hardball if they want, and that seems to be the tack they're taking right now. And we've seen it in the past where guys become so disgruntled they can force their way out. But I don't think you're going to see much of a discount. With this type of player who's former Defensive Player of the Year, 6-time All-Pro player, if he doesn't play another down, he's probably in the Hall of Fame. So they're not going to give him away. They're going to have to get significant assets back, and that's part of the problem, especially from a draft standpoint, because that's typically what NFL teams are going to want, and the Eagles' draft picks aren't very good because they're too good. Starting with 32 overall this season, and even if you project years down the line, because everyone thinks the Eagles are going to have a very good team next year, you might be talking about the 28th to 32nd pick or somewhere in that range. So you would think other teams would have much more to offer, and then you start getting, all right, what else can you offer? And that, to me, would involve younger players that people would seem to have a difficult problem that have grown tremendously loyal to them already, which is kind of silly, but that's the reality of the situation.
No, she said the compensation when asked about it was she compared it to the Khalil Mack trade back in 2019, 2 1s, a 3, and a 6. She also said she didn't think 2 1s would be necessary here. So that's interesting. Do you think?
I would say it would be for the Eagles. If you're giving
because of where they
another team, if another team is given a top 10 pick, you don't have to go higher. You might have to go 3rd round, 6th round, something like that. But there's a big difference between a top 10 pick and the 32nd pick. So for the Eagles, I would think 2 number ones might be demanded because they're going to be low picks, and they're even going to. And if you think about it, it's the lowest it could possibly be right now this year, and you're giving them Myles Garrett, so it might be just as low next year. And those are not nearly as valuable as, say, one top 10 pick, both of those picks.
Mm-hmm.
So the Eagles are a little bit different than other teams right now.
Let's go back to Bond for a second here because, he has a lot of suitors. Maybe it's too much. But is he a guy that you think, Roseman has said we might have to do some things different, we might have to change some courses here, yada, yada. Does that mean, hey, we might have to think about paying a guy more than we really want to based on we don't really have anything else? I mean, you got Dean who's hurt. You've got Burks who's a free agent. You've got Bond who's a free agent. I mean, you're looking down the road of going back to where you were a couple of years ago when you let Edwards and White walk and how much of a disaster it was the next year.
Yeah, well, I think, when he said that, it was pretty much an indication that they're going away from their typical foundational thinking, which would be to keep the defensive lineman and not keep the linebacker. I think they're preparing people. That's what he was trying to allude to, that they're trying to keep the linebacker and they're probably going to lose the defensive front people, which is not the way the Eagles typically do business. So I think that's what Howie was alluding to there.
Gotcha.
And that things are going to change a little bit. And you can play devil's advocate and say that's been very successful to the Eagles. So should you move away from that foundational principle for an outlier of a season? But I think if you look at the way Zach Bond played, and I'm a big T.J. Edwards guy, and I think they should have brought T.J. Edwards back, but he played, and T.J. was great that season, but that no comparison to Zach was and what Zach was this season.
Right. I mean, it's you mentioned T.J. Edwards, who got paid I think we said like $7-8 million. He went to Chicago. Kaiser White was also here. Is he a free agent again, Kaiser?
He signed a 2-year deal, so I'm not sure if he did, but that's not. I don't. That's not something the Eagles are going to revisit.
Right. Okay. Well, if that's the case, if they lose Bond for whatever reason, you would have to come up with a better plan than what you did with Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham, right?
Yeah, well, I think the Kobe injury has been a little bit overstated from the standpoint of the rehab of it. It's probably about 6 months. He was already off crutches at cleanout day, which is, if you think about him coming back from the Liz Frank the year prior, he was on the rollabout, he was on the crutches, then a walking boot for months and months and months. Here he's already off the crutches. Supposed to be a 6 month
Did he say,
rehab.
John, that his kneecap went up into his thigh?
Yeah.
That's pretty nasty. I never heard of such a thing.
It is, it's not positive, but I think from the standpoint, I think people hear that and assume the worst. It's happened before, and you just fix it, and he should be fine. They're not going to push it to the point of him being ready for training camp, I don't think, but he should be ready for week 1. I do think Nakobe Dean is going to be back, and he's going to be healthy, and he's going to play. And then they do have confidence in Jeremiah Trotter Jr. as a developmental prospect. But, they want Zach Bond back. They've made that clear. He's the number one priority, so I'm not trying to say that. But for the people saying, well, they don't have anything, so they got to bring in, not to, your point of Kaiser. They're not.
By the way, Kaiser is a free agent.
Yeah, they're not going to go down that route. They would.
Well, I guess my point is you're hoping that they don't have to go down. Forget Kaiser, someone in that mold, because you've lost Bond and you're not sure Dean's going to be ready, and it's like we got to find some stopgap.
Yeah, and that would probably be Oren Burks. He's just bringing Oren, who played very well after Nakobe got injured, and you let him and sort of Trot battle it out. And hopefully Trot could win the job, but if he doesn't, you have a steady veteran who could fill in.
Mm-hmm.
Would be my guess of the way they handle it. But make no mistake, they want Zach Bond back.
When you hear a lot of this national buzz about how he wants to take big swings, does that suggest to you that that's coming from somewhere? Or, you know what I mean? Like, what kind of messaging is that? That it's not just Diana Russini who has said, well, they want to take, Jeremy Fowler said the same thing earlier this week. They want to be the most aggressive team on the trade market.
Howie's in people's heads, and he likes it, so he plays it up a little bit. And he's he calls about everybody, so it's easy as an insider to say, oh, the Eagles are interested in insert name, because he's going to call about everybody, and he admits he calls about everybody. And a player like Myles Garrett, he's going to be bold if there's an opportunity. But he also said a bunch of things out there that people kind of ignore, in that, they're not necessarily in a position to pull this off right now. And as I said, it starts with their draft capital. Now, so your assumption is that he wants to play with the Eagles, which may be the case. He wants to chase a ring, which may be the case. Doesn't mean Cleveland's going to say, all right, we're going to give you the Philadelphia for less than market value. Even though Andrew and Howie are friends, that's not how it works. And if you look, as I said, if you look at any trade chart, you can't even get up to the top 10 with the 32nd pick and the 32nd pick the next year. You can't even get to the top 10. So from that standpoint, the 10th pick in the draft, for sake of an argument, is worth more than the Eagles' next 2 first-round picks. That's difficult to overcome when the draft capital is going to be the major aspect of getting this particular player.
Do you think the Eagles would have any interest in moving one of their younger players?
Yeah, I think you might have to. And I think, I brought that up on my show. People, you can't trade Nolan Smith. Well, if you want Myles Garrett, you can.
Right.
You can't. You're going to have to probably trade a younger player who's cheap and cost effective, because that's the way that the Browns would want to go. So all this factors into it. That's how you close that gap from a poorer team that has better draft capital. That's really the only way you can close that gap.
What do you think ultimately happens with the Browns? I mean, the Browns say they don't trade them, but I mean, eventually they're going to have to bite the bullet here in your mind.
Well, Miles has never struck me as a guy who's going to be, Terrell Owens like or something like that. So, but I go back to Stephon Diggs and that trade that happened in one afternoon. He made it very clear he wasn't happy, and 4 hours later he's in Buffalo. So if it does to get to a point where the player just doesn't want to be part of the organization, you have to bite the bullet, so to speak. But in this particular case, I don't think it means that the Browns are going to have a fire sale and take less than this player is particularly worth.
We're talking with John McMullen, Birch 365, weekday mornings, 8 a.m. on the Jacob Media YouTube channel. And, of course, we also know this is kind of the crazy season, right? When everybody's out in Indianapolis having some brewskis together, everything starts flying around. But it would seem that, the Eagles have some interesting choices to make. And, you mentioned Bond is probably the highest on their priority list here. You think Sweat's as good as gone?
Yeah, I mean, Sweat's the one guy that everyone seems to assume is leaving. And, I think a lot of that sort of is related to the Eagles making them take a pay cut to come back last year. Typically, that's a bad situation that players aren't going to forget. So I think a lot of people default to that and say he's not going to come back. But there's some, the same thing, the market, in theory, the player that's produced like Josh Sweat should be priced out, but he does have some unique physical issues from younger in his career that maybe teams are wary of, and maybe that knocks his salary down a little bit. And if that's the case, you never say never, with the door opening to return. But I would certainly say 80% Josh Sweat is gone.
Yeah, and Milton's an interesting one just because I would imagine he gets the most money of the three or not.
Yeah, I would think because of the position and where it's been going, he's going to be a $20 million player minimum. And, yeah, he'll certainly get the most, and that's probably going to be too expensive for the Eagles. Because remember, it's not just about 1 year. I think people get hyper-focused on the immediacy. The Eagles are they always think about these things in 3-year increments, and they know what's coming down the pike with Jalen Carter and his extension. And when it's his time, he's likely going to reset the market at defensive tackle. So then you start talking about putting that kind of money into two players at defensive tackle. Is that possible? Well, the Eagles did it at wide receiver, so anything's possible, but unlikely because it seems like they've settled on this formula that, especially now that they have Vic Fangio, it's going to be we're going to pay the offense and we're going to play young players on defense.
Real quick, Stafford stays with the Rams. Rodgers to the Giants?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if he stays at MetLife. I mean, they have to go in the same direction. There's a lot of talk that the Giants have shifted towards him. The Raiders were also in that Matthew Stafford sweepstakes, and now the talk is Russell Wilson out there or maybe Sam Darnold or somebody of that nature. So if you're looking for an Aaron Rodgers fit, I would not want to go back to New York after what went on, but there's not a lot of openings. And Haven't heard much about Rodgers to Las Vegas. So right now, the Giants look like the most likely scenario.
That would be interesting. A little Rodgers twice a season. Of course, the Eagles and the Giants. We'll see how that all goes. And how about Deebo Samuel wearing a Commander's uniform? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, Debo's that kind of, I mean, 2 years ago, that would have scared me. But after seeing him last year, life moves quickly in the NFL, and he didn't look like the same player last year. So that's one of those things where I think people get caught up in the big name, but he did not play well last year. So that wouldn't scare me too much if I'm the Eagles. In fact, I think that'd probably be a mistake from Washington's perspective.
All right, Johnny Mac, we know the Combine is here, but the NFL free agent period is before the draft, and that will start heating up. We'll have plenty more on that. And, of course, you could check out John McMullen on Birds 365 weekday mornings at 8 a.m. on the Jacob Media YouTube channel, and his writing over at Sports Illustrated and on the X platform at JF McMullen right here on the Sports Bash. Thank you, John.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, as always, John McMullen here, kind enough to join us as we take you through this Friday edition of the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and live video streaming on the X platform, formerly Twitter, and on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe, follow along, download the free mobile app, listen on your phone, message us through the app on your phone. It's free, thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. This hour of the show brought to you by Broadleaf's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Your trusted source for plumbing, heating, service, and installation. Call 609-390-3907. Visit them online at broadleafs.net. Our Eagles off-season coverage continues. Football at 4 on the way, plus Nicky Nuggets. I think the fascinating part about the Bond thing is how much he has possibly priced himself out. I mean, I think the beginning of the free agent, 2 weeks ago, you're like, okay, what's he going to get? You just heard John say he's probably going to be in upwards of $13 million. And I had heard $15 million. But John said 13. I'll go with that number over what I'm hearing at 15. But people are thinking he's going to get like $10 million a year. I think you are going to be disappointed to see that he gets so much money. And then you have to ask yourself, are you willing to pay that much money for Zach Bond? Do we truly believe Zach Bond can do what he did this year again? That's another question we got to dive into. We're going to dive into some of the NFL stuff on the way. More Sports Bash coming up. I'm Mike Gill. And don't forget, my friends over at Game Day Men's Health in Egg Harbor Township, 1 in 4 men over 30 in the United States have low testosterone levels, mainly because people are afraid to go check them out. Go get your levels tested if you're chasing peak performance, or maybe you're having a little problem, you know where, or maybe you want to feel your best. Check out Game Day Men's Health in Egg Harbor Township. Easy to do, comfortable setting. You walk on in, have a conversation, and find out if they can get ahead of the game. Call them at 609-365-7088 or online at GameDayMen'sHealth.com. It's on English Creek Avenue in EHT. Easy to get to. Perfect spot. Walk on in. Comfortable setting. They have a couple flat screen TVs, a couple great little rooms you can sit in. They'll ask you a bunch of questions. Take you about 15 minutes. Not that long. And you can find out whether or not you can get ahead of the game at Game Day Men's Health, Egg Harbor Township. More Sports Bash on the way. All right, 3:30 happy hour Friday, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Download it wherever you get your apps for your phone. And, of course, you can watch the show live video on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. So McMullen had some interesting things to say. It's going to be, listen, we love the whole process of leading up to it. Well, this happened. Well, that happened. There's this report. When it happens, we're going to be like, wow. They went and got Myles Garrett, or they didn't. I think that's going to be the biggest story. But as Tim in Summers Point texts in at 609-403-0973, says, Mike, if the only way of obtaining Garrett involves trading a player like Nolan Smith, I'd be so out. Am I crazy to think Nolan Smith is semi-untouchable? I mean, the guy's like 23 years old and just had an amazing postseason. I don't think adding Garrett moves the needle as much as you think if you have to compare it to what you have to give up. I think, and Milton Williams need to be the focus. Milton does not grow on trees. That's from Tim and Summers Point. So Tim brings up a lot of interesting points. One, is Nolan Smith a semi-untouchable? So much so that you wouldn't, Nolan Smith is interesting. First year, barely played. Couldn't get on the field, basically did nothing. Good year last year. Wouldn't say he was, great. 6.5 sacks. But as Tim mentions, he's only 20, I think he's 22, 23 years old. He is a very young player, Nolan Smith is. So he has obviously more gas in the tank than Myles Garrett. He's 24 years old. He just turned 24 in January. So he is a very young player. What is his ceiling? This is almost like the Tyrese Maxey for Dame Lillard type of situation.
Kind of. I mean, the difference is that I think the Maxey's potential was a little more obvious to some of us, whereas Nolan Smith, I think it's a little more subjective. To me, I think Nolan Smith has a great ceiling, and if you're someone who believes, one of the comps about him coming out of the draft was he was a more flexible and bendy Khalil Mack. If that's what you think he can be, then yes, he is semi-untradeable. But if you don't think he's ever going to get to that level, again, it depends on where you come from. Mike, when you talked about the Maxey Lillard thing a couple of years ago, your whole point was you thought, hey, Maxey could be a multiple-time All-Star, but you didn't feel like he was a franchise player, whereas you looked at Damian Lillard as a franchise player, whereas other people said, hey, I think Tyrese Maxey could be a 30-point-a-game guy. So I think it depends with Nolan Smith. Do you believe what his potential is? What is his ceiling? If you think his ceiling is less, then you trade him. If you think his ceiling is more, then you don't.
I don't know what to think of Nolan Smith's ceiling here. He had 6.5 sacks last year.
In a part-time role.
He was kind of in a part-time role, yes. But what's his ceiling? Is he a 12-sack guy? Is he a 14-sack guy? Because that's essentially what Myles Garrett is. Myles Garrett's a double-digit sack guy.
Every year.
And what I think is different between Garrett and Nolan Smith is the positions they play and what it does for Jalen Carter. Because Myles Garrett is a guy that you have to try to block up front. That means someone has to put extra attention on him. And that doesn't mean you don't have to put extra attention on Nolan Smith, but Nolan Smith, kind of a stand-up guy. I think that it helps Jalen Carter more to have a Myles Garrett level player with him than having Nolan Smith does. I don't know what Nolan Smith, I really, if you said to me, I'd ask Tim in Summers Point who had that text, what do you think Nolan Smith's ceiling is? Is he a 10-sack guy? Is he a 12-sack guy? Is he a 14-sack guy?
Well, for example, if I were to tell you that Nolan Smith is going to be the next Khalil Mack, is that enough to say I won't trade him?
I mean, Khalil Mack in his prime, yeah. I mean, he was a pretty damn good player. I mean, by the way, he's the
but you just said his prime. So, are you willing to wait until to get the most out of Nolan Smith from 26 to 30, or do you say, hey, I need Myles Garrett right now?
It's funny because Mac's a free agent right now, and there's some people that think the Eagles should go after him as that 1 year kind of, hey, you're at the end of the ring chasing
Chris
type
Long
of thing.
Style guy.
Yeah, like a ring chaser. Hey, you want to come out here and be a situational pass rusher at the end of the line? Come on here to Philadelphia. Last year, he's still a guy who had 6 sacks last year. He had 17 sacks the year before that. So to go back to Nolan Smith, so Khalil Mack had 15 sacks, 11, 12 and a half, 8.5, 9 through his 24 to 29-year-old seasons. Is that the kind of player we think Nolan Smith is? I personally do not. No, by the way, Khalil Mack was a first-team All-Pro 3 times, Defensive Player of the Year.
But you also said he was 24 years old that first big sack year, right? Nolan Smith just turned 24.
I'm just saying, in his best years, he was first-team All-Pro 3 times, and he was the AP Defensive Player of the Year. Not to mention he was a runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think Nolan Smith is in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year? No, I do not.
Then you do trade him. For the way you don't feel like he is that level.
No,
so for you trading him is less of a negative. I'll call it.
But the question is, just because I don't think he's Khalil Mack in his prime, it doesn't mean like if he's lesser than Khalil Mack that there's some avenue that I still think he's worth. I still think Myles Garrett for 2 to 3 seasons is a better, more bang. Now, maybe not bang for your buck because you're not paying Nolan Smith nearly as much as you would be paying Myles Garrett. The question is, for 2 to 3 years, is he a better player than Nolan Smith is over the next 2 to 3 years? I have a hard time thinking that Nolan Smith is going to be a double-digit sack guy, AP, first-team All-Pro level player.
And I think that is where you have to make a decision about the now versus later. What is more important to you?
Well, exactly, because this is the way I look at it. Okay, I get Myles Garrett in Jalen Hurts' prime, A.J. Brown's prime, Saquon Barkley's prime, Devontae Smith's prime,
but even more
my offensive line's prime,
Quinyon
Mitchell's prime, Cooper DeJean's prime, yada, yada, yada. Let's say 3 years from now, Nolan Smith becomes this great player. Where are the Eagles as an organization, though? Those guys are now in their 30s. Hurts is now 30, A.J. Brown's now 30. So it's like Myles Garrett being on Cleveland. Nolan Smith might be great 3 years from now, but the team might not be ready to win, is what my point is.
You also can re-sign Nolan Smith years later in free agency, which would be funny, but still. But back to the Myles Garrett thing. You mentioned a name earlier, and so did Diana Russini in the audio, that I think is actually more important than some of the guys you mentioned, which is Jalen Carter. Mike, you mentioned about what this could do for Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter had an amazing season, but the stat nerds, right, the stat people are like, well, he didn't really do that much, when you don't realize he was the most double-team player on defense in all of football this year. So now if you're taking those double teams away from him, now you're elevating his value to your team while also getting a guy like Myles Garrett. So you're actually almost getting a 2-for-1, right?
Yeah, my big thing is I feel like the Eagles have to look at the roster right now, the age of the players on their roster right now. They're all like that Hurts, Brown, Smith, the offensive line. They're all in that like 26, 27, 28-year range.
Right.
So you should feel pretty good that Myles Garrett is still going to be a pretty productive player for the next 2 to 3 seasons, which lines up with your offensive core and these young players on defense and Jalen Carter. So you take your shot in the next 2 to 3 years while Myles Garrett is at his peak. Whereas Nolan Smith might, even if he is at his best, is he better than Myles Garrett is? And let's say at the end of the deal, like that third year, maybe you've won a Super Bowl. Heck, maybe you've won 2. And then the third year, maybe Myles Garrett starts to slow down a little bit and he's not the same player. And then here's Nolan Smith over here and he's got 12 sacks. And you're like, oh, my God. But then your offense might not be in a position to be where it was 2 years before. You know what I'm saying?
Right. It's about the big picture, as Howie Roseman said. Howie Roseman played the audio earlier where he said, I got to worry about the big picture. He said, you can't worry about some of the minutia here.
Right. This isn't to downplay the player that Nolan Smith will be. I'm just saying his best years might be three years down the road.
Myles Garrett's right now.
And Myles Garrett's right now. So when 3 years down the road, when Nolan Smith is ready to be his best player, the Eagles might be kind of hitting a downturn a little bit. I'm not, and listen, just because what's A.J. Brown, 27, 28 years old? I mean, he might be 30 or 31. Is he going to take a huge dip because he's a 30, 31-year-old receiver? I don't know. I mean, Devontae Smith, what's he, like 24, 25?
A.J. Brown is 27. He will be 28 this summer, is A.J. Brown.
So he's going to play this season at 28 years old. So, 2 years, he's going to be 30. So you want to get these 2 years and get your best shot. Is your best shot with a player like Myles Garrett, a proven – I mean, Myles Garrett is, quite frankly, one of the greatest players at his position of all time. He just happened to play on an awful team.
Right. It's not his fault.
No, but I mean –
trash team.
An awful team. Just a horrible, horrible team. But that said, he is one of the greatest players of all time at his position. I mean, this guy is a complete game wrecker.
And
is
also
Nolan Smith a game wrecker?
Well, I was going to say, even Nolan Smith with the game record, one thing Myles Garrett does that he doesn't. Myles Garrett is a 3-down player. He is going to be out there pretty much the whole game. Nolan Smith has shown himself to be a very good situational player, but we haven't seen Nolan Smith out there stopping the run. Myles Garrett can do that.
By the way, Myles Garrett, sacks. His rookie year, he had 7 in 11 games. 13.5, 10, 12, 16, 16, 14, 14. Never has he had a season other than his rookie year when, by the way, he only played 11 games, where he had under double-digit sacks. He is a first-team All-Pro 4 times. He's a Defensive Player of the Year once, and that was not last season, the year before. So you're talking about a guy who the last 2 years has 14 sacks. His average sack total over 17 games. Now, mind you, some of the years there was only a 16-game season. It only went to 17 a couple of years ago.
Right.
And in a 17-game season, he averages 15 sacks a season. I mean, I can't imagine a world where I say no to that.
No, there's not. I am curious.
By the way, how many other defensive ends, edge rushers, average 15 sacks a season for their career?
You mean all time?
All
or just,
time.
like, currently?
Yeah, of all time.
Maybe Bruce Smith, Reggie White, maybe?
I'm saying, I'm just throwing hypothetical. I have a hard time thinking there's very many players in the history of the game who are on that level, where there might be some, but not many. When you're talking about similar players, you're talking about the best of the best. You're talking about, you mentioned Bruce Smith, Reggie White.
Bruce Smith averaged 12 sacks a season.
12. Okay, that's not 15. I said 15. I'm looking for a guy. By the way, it's 14.9. So if you want to get me on a technicality, fine. He averages 14.9 sacks over 17 games. Now, mind you, he played some of his seasons in 16 games.
By the way, Reggie averaged 14 and a half sacks.
So Garrett averages more.
A little, yeah.
14.9. I mean, a little, but still, we're talking about a player of Reggie White's capabilities. That's on another level.
A totally different level.
That's a different level. That's a different level of player. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe, watch the show live. And when we come back, could they also add a player that could be another part of the defensive front? We got that for you coming up on the other side. This hour is brought to you by our friends at Broadleaf's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Call 609-390-3907. Adam Kaplan's at the Combine. Football at 4. The Eagles have hired a new member of the staff. We'll get into that as well. Stick around. More Sports Bash coming up.
Aaron Donald was a smaller player in the league, so I kind of look up to him, and I plan on doing some of the same things that he did also. So just his violence and how fast he get off the ball and like his motor. I feel like I bring some of those same things to whatever team I go to. So.
That's Ole Miss defensive tackle Walter Nolan. Why do we hear from him? Well, in the latest Mel Kiper Jr. mock draft at ESPN.com, that's who he has the Eagles taking. A player who says he sees his game modeled after Aaron Donald. The last time they talked about a player in Philadelphia and Aaron Donald, it was Milton Williams. His workouts at the Combine were only rivaled by Aaron Donald. So keep an eye on Walter Nolan. He would be a guy available at pick number 32, and the name that he mentioned was Aaron Donald, because I think the Eagles are probably going to have to take a tackle to replenish Milton Williams, especially if Milton Williams walks. Obviously, if Milton Williams walks, I think 32, it's almost a fait accompli that they would take a tackle if they stayed there, because that's an area where you're going to have a lot of talent and depth in this particular draft would be at number 32. It's a fascinating discussion of all the things that are happening. And by the way, we're closing in on free agency, which opens up on March the 10th. So literally tomorrow is March 1st already. It is a leap year, so not a leap year, so no 29th. We're done with February after today, which means 10 days to go until NFL free agency opens. In fact, not this Monday coming up, but the following Monday is the start of NFL free agency. So a lot of these stories will start to materialize, and we'll start to get some answers here on Zach Bond, on Mekhi Becton, on Milton Williams, and on, of course, Josh Sweat.
And I think that's the biggest reason why this team, not that they want to let Josh Sweat and Milton Williams go, but maybe, shall I say, more comfortable with it, is because of the fact that they have done such a great job at drafting and putting resources into the defensive line. That's at least a position that you can say, hey, we can find guys to fill these roles.
Definitely. Like, for instance, they'll find guys to fill some roles. I like this text, by the way, from who just sent this text in? Oh, Bill in Egg Harbor Township. Says, Garrett would be like Barkley coming over to our team after playing years without a Super Bowl. Then coming to a winner will motivate him even more. Just ask Barkley. He'll be happy all year. All that stuff I agree with, but he's right. I mean, you put Myles Garrett here, this is going to be like you would get Myles Garrett, a guy who got 14 sacks in Cleveland, and now they got Jalen Carter to decide what to do with too. This guy could come here and have a Barkley-like impact where you were a great player in New York, Barkley, 1,200-yard. You come here, you're a 2,000-yard guy. Garrett has 14 sacks in Cleveland. What's he going to do with Jalen Carter playing next to him?
18? Maybe 19?
Wouldn't rule it out.
By the way, I looked
By
it
the
up.
way, I know who Nolan Smith's not getting 18 sacks.
That's true. But we looked it up during the break. So here is the list of the highest sacks per year in NFL history. Deacon Jones, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Reggie White. That's the list.
That's the list. I mean, listen, you're talking about an all-time great, and he's still got prime years left in him. I think it's going to be a fascinating decision for Howie Roseman. Does he want to swing? Does he have to give up a player? Does he want to give up multiple picks? We'll be looking at it here all week as, of course, NFL free agency opens 2 Mondays from this Monday coming up. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Quickly, this one says, text message from Kevin in Canada. Mike, you said a lot of times sports fans get obsessed with names and stats instead of play. And while I think it would be extremely cool to have Myles Garrett, we did just win a Super Bowl with Nolan Smith, Milton Williams, Carter, and Sweat. Maybe if Howie is thinking about making a splash, it should be trading up for an edge rusher or D tackle to replace Sweat instead of mortgaging the future now. We'll discuss that one a little bit more later on in Football at 4. Adam Kaplan's going to join us next, and I'll address that one, Kevin in Canada. Stick around. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Adam Kaplan from the Inside the Birds podcast, where you can get on all podcasting platforms. And don't forget the YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Joins me right now. The Eagles have made a couple coaching moves as well today, which kind of got swept under the rug. Got a lot of text messages we'll get to. But first, let's bring Adam into the conversation here. He is at the NFL Combine, where the Eagles and the NFL are all converged. I know this is a rumor mania out there in Indianapolis, but the Eagles did do a little yard work today, Adam. They brought in a new quarterback coach who was a head coach at the college level, and they also have filled an interesting job because they got a guy to go behind Mr. Stoutland. So at some point, Mr. Stoutland, Jeff Stoutland, might not be here anymore. So that assistant offensive line coach always raises eyebrows.
Yeah, so let's start with the latter. So Greg Austin, Mike, is back. Greg Austin was hired by Chip Kelly in 2013. He was a long time, actually, after he left the Eagles, he became a college offensive line coach. Then went back to the NFL with the Jaguars last season with Doug Peterson, and now he's back in the NFL again with Eagles as an assistant line coach. So they know him in the building. That's important, and Stout knows him, obviously, because Austin worked for him, so that's a good thing. But the big hire, it's a really important hire, is Scott Loeffler, you talked about as the Bowling Green head coach. Some interesting background. So at what point in his football playing career, he was Tom Brady's backup at Michigan. I'm told, this is interesting, I just got this about an hour ago. He actually tried to get back in the NFL after he was the Lions quarterback's coach in 2008, the only year that he was spent in the NFL as a coach. Unfortunately, it was an 0-16 team. He was the finalist for the quarterback's job for the Browns in 2015 that went to Kevin O'Connell. Huh. It's interesting what would happen. So who knows with Kevin O'Connell, Mike? So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. So I'm told he's a very well-respected coach in the scouting and coaching community. This is a really good hire. I think Jeff Mosher, Jeff said this a couple weeks ago, and he nailed it. He said, look, this thing is going so late, we're getting up to the combine that they may just have to hire a college coach. And that's exactly what happened. And again, I'm told that Loeffler wanted to come back to the NFL, and he got a great opportunity. Again, how could, if you're Scott Loeffler, and I don't know what he was making, we always could look that up. Experienced quarterback coaches tend to get around $1 million per year. I can't imagine he was making much more than that at Bowling Green.
Yeah, and if you could, Adam, give some the listeners a little insight on how important that quarterback coach is. I mean, obviously this is like a faceless guy. We don't hear from him throughout the course of the season, but his role is to work directly with the most important player on the team.
It is, and typically the quarterback coach, Mike, on your point, I'll expand on it a little bit. He typically works with the quarterback more than the offensive coordinator or the head coach, who's obviously from the offensive side of the ball, Nick Sirianni, or anyone else on the team. They develop a very close working relationship. That's supposed to happen. And that will happen with Scott Loeffler. Loeffler's going to have to get to know Jalen. And obviously, Jalen plays a specific way, which he's going to have to get a good handle on. And he's getting a late start here. With the crazy story, I'll add another layer to this. It just dumb luck. Last night I met the Bowling Green defense coordinator. He never mentioned Loeffler leaving the school. I don't know if he did know or not. He probably knew that he was interviewing, but anyway, it just happens that a bunch of college coaches who live within driving distance are here, or assistant coaches. So look, remember 2 years ago, Mike, they hired Sean Desai right here. Sean Desai was on my flight from Philly to the Combine to get his job. So you can hire people late. This is a big hire, Mike. This is remember, he replaces Doug Nussmeier, who now is the offense coordinator for the Saints. So that's where this is going.
Yeah, and Adam Kaplan, obviously you look at you're doing it late in the game. You mentioned Doug Nussmeier. He is now in New Orleans. They have a new offensive coordinator. Is there any concern about the continuity of the way they now have this in place?
Yeah, now look, he's going to have a new play caller, a new quarterback's coach, Jalen Hurts. So that certainly is an adjustment. He's been through this a lot, which Jalen's talked about, particularly new play callers. So that's a concern, man. There's no question. That's something we need to watch here, and see if we notice anything in OTAs. That'll be the first time that we will get a clue if there's any change. We know from what we're told, the scheme should be relatively the same, but the way they call it will be differently because you have a new play caller. So we'll see if there are any new changes. Does it still look like they're going to be so heavy run like no other NFL team? I mean, Barkley would be the foundation of the offense will start with Barkley, but we'll look in to see if there are any other changes.
All right, Adam, obviously we mentioned you're out there. There's a lot of stuff swirls. I guess, a lot of it seems to be centered around Myles Garrett, and we know.
Sure.
So I think this is interesting. Whether the stuff is real, fake, this, that, his name keeps coming up, and it's all over the place. The Browns don't want to move him. He doesn't want to listen to them, so there's a stare down that happens here. Is it even a thought? Obviously Roseman gets involved in all these things, but in your mind, do they really have the ammunition to be involved in a move of that magnitude if it was available?
Mike, a couple of things here. As I told you on Tuesday, if Myles Garrett becomes available, if the Eagles are not first in line, they'll be 1A in line. It's a neat position. Howie likes to splash moves, and it's a guy that I feel that they'd be heavily interested in. And as I try to warn people, as a personnel guy told me from a team that definitely wants to get involved in this if it ever happens, there's a cap issue the Browns have to get through, which is significant, and doing a trade now which would be a problem. You have to have really good draft picks. Like the Eagles trading their 32nd pick and another 32nd pick, let's say it's a second rounder and a player. I don't know how interested they would have to be. It would be in that, Mike. That's the thing. If you're on the other side, how enticing is that going to be? You'd rather have at least something in the upper half of the first round.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is.
One of the keys to this conversation, Adam, is, and I don't know how much this plays, but Garrett himself has said he's only interested in playing for a Super Bowl contender. I mean, I don't know how much they're willing to acquiesce for him. There's a stare down. He don't even want to listen to him. So, I don't know. This thing feels like it's going to get interesting.
It could. Look, Mike, this is what I got this week on the situation to add to kind of what's out there and the speculation. I'm Chad, what I think from talking to people in the league who have a keen eye on this situation. We're definitely interested in what's going to happen because it'll affect their football team. The Browns really just want to wait this out. They want to get through free agency. They want Garrett to see what they get. They want Garrett to see what they get in the draft. They want to see what the plan is at quarterback. They want him to see it, and then hopefully he'll see how much they can improve the football team. But they have a significant cap problem. They don't have a starting quarterback. That's very clear. Deshaun Watson's not a starting quarterback anymore, and plus he may not be available next season because remember he retore his Achilles. And I know there's a lot of speculation on Kirk Cousins, who's 37 years old, who got benched last season. That's not an answer. And you could certainly understand, and by the way, a lot of that speculation is coming from Myles Garrett's camp, just so you're aware. That's the word I got. So it's not coming from the Browns. So that's where it's coming from. And he's not happy. Look, I don't blame him, Mike. So I get the endless speculation. As I told you, some of that's actually real, that the Eagles would have some interest. But then they're trying to get some deals done here. They're trying to get an idea of where a number of these other free agents are going to be, whether they're going to be with them or somewhere else, and they're working on that. But it's a very interesting situation here because the cap is going up in a major way. Mike, biggest cap number in NFL history. Teams are going to have more cap space to spend, not more cash to spend. There's a major difference between the two. But this helps with flexibility, man. This does help teams that don't balance the cap very well.
All right, I know you got about 30 seconds. Any indication that Bourne will get priced out because of the amount of suitors?
Mike, one thing you should know is I told you in email, Mike, if he's asking for Roquan Smith money, which is $20 million a year, the first two seasons, 22.5 per season, fully guaranteed. That's a walk away number. Okay, your Eagles aren't doing something like that. If he's willing to be reasonable, he'll stay. They want to be back. They want him back, and he wants to be back. So you have a mutual interest there, but it comes down what his asking price is. But understand leverage. The more teams get in it, the more teams actually give his agent he's close to what he wants. That hurts the Eagles. So just be careful of any assumptions. And I try to warn you about this, Mike. Remember I told you be careful saying, well, this guy's a priority, that guy's a priority. It has nothing to do with it. Priorities become how much you're willing to pay and what you're willing to pay and what you're willing to agree to. People get this wrong all the time, and I roll my eyes like people don't really understand the way it works. Eagles would love to have the top three defensive players or free agents back on the team, but it's just a matter of what you're willing to pay and what they can agree to winds up being what you would call the priority. So just be careful what you see out there.
Yeah, we know that obviously when you win the Super Bowl too, a lot of your players become high on the other team's list because they want what you have, and that's what Howie Roseman has to try to figure out. Adam is at the Combine, and of course there's a lot going on out there. I know you got to run, but we appreciate the quick updates.
Sounds good, thanks.
All right, Football at 4 with Adam Kaplan from Inside the Birds, the source for all Eagles intel right here, Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. He is out in Indianapolis, so we'll let him get back to the Combine. Today's actually the day where they are working out and things are starting to happen. But let's keep it here. I got text messages I want to get to. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. So let's go back to the one from Kevin in Canada. Is either listening or watching on the YouTube channel or on the X platform. He says, Mike, you said a lot of times as sports fan we get obsessed with names and stats instead of play. And while I think it would be extremely cool to have Myles Garrett, we did just win the Super Bowl with Nolan Smith, Milton Williams, Carter, and Sweat. So let's stop there. They did win the Super Bowl with those guys. But what if two of them are gone? And I know what your point is. You're saying, well, none of those guys are Hall of Famers. Or, well, Carter could be, but if you lost Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, what are you replacing them with? So let's bring that to the equation. You said we just won the Super Bowl with Nolan Smith, Milton Williams, Carter, and Sweat. Yes, but two of those guys might not be here. Also, you can't rest on your laurels and say, well, we won with those guys last year. Why shouldn't we win with them again? You could. I'm not saying you can't. But as we talked about before, the Eagles' path to victory took a little bit of a detour because Detroit never made it to where they were supposed to go. Let's say Detroit's a number 1 seed again and they're healthy. Are you going into Detroit and beating that team at full strength? I don't know about that. It's possible, but you can't just roll the same team back out there and think that other teams aren't improving. So that's one. Kevin in Canada goes on to say, maybe if Howie is thinking about making a splash play, it should be trading up for a stud edge rusher or D tackle to replace Sweat instead of mortgaging the future for now. Well, let's take that one. If you are trading up for a stud edge rusher or defensive tackle to replace Sweat instead of mortgaging the future for now, how are you trading up? You're going to have to mortgage something. How do you move up in the draft? You got to trade something away. So what are you doing to trade from 32 to get to where? I mean, where am I getting this stud edge rusher? Are you saying top 5, top 10? How am I doing that from 32? So it sounds great in theory, but to go from 32 to get a stud edge rusher in this draft, you're probably going to have to get in the top 10. How am I doing that? So I don't like some of the guys Kevin in Canada mentioned, Mason Graham, James Pierce, Williams, all highly talented prospect. Train for Garrett goes against our rotational pass rusher philosophy and unstocks our shelves. Trading up to get the guys you mentioned unstocks the shelves as well. I mean, you're going to have to give up high draft choices or a player to get that high. So instead of trading all the assets or whatever, you're going to have to make a similar trade to get into the top 10 that you would have to go just get a player of Myles Garrett ilk. And I would add, I really like the text message from, I think it was Bill in EHT, who said, you bring Garrett here, it's going to be like what happened with Barkley, a very, very, very good player. Now, Myles Garrett is a all-time player. He's going to be better here than he was there.
The other thing I always wanted to point out is that, you know, when you look at what acquiring Garrett would do, I think that this is not about just replacing Sweat and Milton Williams. Like, it goes back to something you said before, Mike. It's like the Dodgers mentality. It's like, all right, how can we one up last year? How can we up the ante? How can we make, you know, the Eagles are now the hunted, right? So now it's going to be like,
not only are they the hunted, you have to keep in mind, they are the hunted because they won the Super Bowl, but there also are Detroit who thinks they were better, but because of injuries. You already have Amon-Ra St. Brown calling them out, saying he wants to play them on opening night to have an NFC championship game at full strength. You got the Lions saying, you weren't better than us. We just, you know,
We weren't healthy.
We weren't healthy. Similar to what the Niners said the year that you beat them in the NFC Championship game was, well, that game would have been different if Purdy didn't get hurt. The Lions are saying, well, if we weren't hurt and you didn't have to play Washington and you had to come to play us, things possibly are different. So I don't think that there's a lot of buzz that the Eagles ended up not being the best team. I think in the end, I think people watched what they did to Kansas City. I think the people in Detroit are saying, man, if we could have stayed healthy, we think we had the better team. And keep in mind, I talked about Washington. They made it to the NFC Championship game. That was a half-assed team that got to the NFC Championship game for all intents and purposes, but they found their quarterback. Now they can start filling the gaps around the deficiencies of that team because now they don't have to keep searching for the quarterback like they've had to. So they start to get better. The Rams, there was a big talk this offseason about Matthew Stafford leaving. Well, guess what? He's not leaving now, and that team is very young on the defensive side of the ball. They've got young weapons, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams. That team is now on the rise. Green Bay has been on the rise. That's a very young team as well. So the Eagles can't just say, let's bring back the same exact guys and do nothing. You have to do something.
And by the way, you know who's rumored by some people to go to Green Bay this offseason is Josh Sweat.
He's rumored to go to a lot of places, but yeah, if he goes to Green Bay, that would just boost. Because I think one problem with the Green Bay defense is they don't have that guy. They definitely don't have that guy. Some breaking news on the Sports Bash right now. According to the 76ers, Joel Embiid has been ruled out for the rest of the season. This is the email from the 76ers that just came to us moments ago. The Sixers and Joel Embiid have been consulting with top specialists regarding ongoing issues with his left knee. After further evaluation, it has been determined that he is medically unable to play and will miss the remainder of the season to focus on treatment and rehabilitation. We are working with medical experts to determine the exact treatment plan and will update media when we have more information. The team and specialists will continue working with Joel to ensure the best path forward for his long-term health and performance. All right, so the Friday news dump for the Joel Embiid news. Not a surprise.
It's about time. Took long enough.
Well, I mean, everybody was just kind of waiting for this. It's the right thing to do. Just get him out in terms of find out what's wrong with this knee and move on.
Mike, if I could ask you just a couple questions on this, because I know a lot of people are thinking, if they're sitting in their car listening to the show or they're watching on your YouTube channel, they might be asking, what took so long, Mike Gill?
Well, I listen, what took so long for them to tell everybody? They knew. He wasn't playing again. I mean, it's a charade. I mean, again, Friday, 4 o'clock, they put this out there. They knew he wasn't playing. They just were trying to make it like we're not throwing in the towel. I don't know if they felt like, let's take the temperature of the fan base and see if they want to keep going for the playoffs or not. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, let's not say he's out, but see if the fans want to go for the playoffs or not.
Well, there's a loud group of fans who were saying this weeks ago they should shut him down.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though. It's like the fans, my point is the fans have been saying since 3-4 weeks ago, like, the season's over. The season's a disaster. No, we don't want to see Joel play anymore.
To me, after they lost those 3 games to the Pistons, the Bucks, and the Raptors, all 3 of those teams were shorthanded. To me, that was the moment you should have done this. That was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, listen, I mean, it's been a disaster for Joel. It's been a disaster for the team, but now he's out for the year, and I guess they'll get some clarity to start moving forward, hopefully, on what's wrong with him. I mean, I don't know how many people saw the Marcus Hayes piece in the Inquirer the other day, but they're talking about some radical thing where they got to break his hip, reposition his hip so that the pressure from his hip
on the knee
doesn't put as much pressure. I mean, my gosh, I've never even heard of such a thing before. Have you ever heard of such a thing before?
I haven't, but I do know that people have talked about possibly sending him to Germany to get the Kobe procedure. Remember, Kobe had that procedure on his knee years ago, and he was like almost brand new when he came back.
Mm-hmm.
There's
the PRP or something.
The PRP treatments where they basically, they for those who don't know, they basically inject what's almost like brand new cells in your knee.
I mean, if you're at the point where you're talking about a surgery I've never heard of, where you're breaking a guy's hip, that's one of your options. Yeah, that's not good.
I mean, just the way they described it, it sounds like that's going to be a year-long recovery.
I think that I think Marcus said in the piece that it would be about a year-long recovery. In other words, he wouldn't be ready for the start of the season. But you got to figure out how to get this thing fixed. And if it means he misses the first half of next year and he comes back around the All-Star break, the problem is, again, I mean, what are your record without him if he misses half the year? This whole year was supposed to be about, hey, taking it easy the first half of the season so that he was ready for the back end of the season and the playoffs, which was the opposite of last year, where he played the first half of the year and then he got hurt the second half of the year. And then when the playoffs came, he was, not 100%. So this year it was, okay, maybe he's not going to be ready at the start of the year, but after Christmas or after, and it's been a mess. I don't even want to think about it anymore. It frustrates me to no end because I am now robbed of what I enjoy, is watching playoff basketball, getting, involved in the series. I love getting involved in the 7-game series and the night-to-night and the matchups and the back and the forth, and that's out. They have robbed us of that, this team.
Which leads me to my second question I have for you, which is, how do you think this impacts everybody else? Like, what is the domino effect from this on the other players, everybody else in the organization?
Well, I mean, I'd like to listen to Podcast P's pod to hear what he thinks about it, but that's now done.
Right.
I don't even get that enjoyment.
You never listened anyway.
No, I'm just kidding. Mr. Literal took me literal on that one, but no, I don't know. What kind of decision do they make with? They've already Eric Gordon's done for the year.
He's done.
Joel's done for the year.
Jared McCain's done for the year.
At what point? Well, he's already been done. I'm talking about like now.
I
guys
was listening all the guys.
No, I'm talking about guys now. The next one is George. What do I do with him if I'm the Sixers? Do I say, like, if Paul George is essentially getting shots to be able to play in these games, at what point does the organization tell him, okay, no more shots, just shut it down?
I mean, do you almost tell them to go out there and fake an injury so they can put a new
You're not even faking. You're getting, what do you mean fake an injury? You're getting shots to be able to play. That's not faking anything. You are getting shots just so that you can get on the court. So he obviously has not to mention, he has a torn tendon in his finger. He's not faking anything. Yeah. He shouldn't be getting shots to play in a game against the Brooklyn Nets at this stage of the season.
No.
Like, there's no reason for him to say, hey, can you shoot my knee up or my whatever, because I want to be able to play in this game tonight.
And then what happens to Maxey? You just keep
the Maxey's a tough one. I mean, because I don't think that he has a legitimate. Now, he's missed some games.
He has missed some games.
But I don't know that he has a legitimate injury.
Right, he's more banged up than injured.
Yeah, I don't know how you justify keeping him out or not playing him, because there are rules against that. You can't just sit a guy for no reason.
Correct.
He has to have
a legitimate medical reason.
Right. So I don't know what you do with Maxey. Put it this way. If Maxey plays without Embiid and George, they're not going to be very good anyway. I mean, quite frankly, right? I mean, what, are they going to win 2 games? So
the next domino goes back to the question that Ryan asked you yesterday. Is what happens to Nick Nurse? What happens to the coaching staff now at the end of the season?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think it's a fair question to start looking at what's next for this team with the key guys, because, Embiid, untradeable, I would think. George, very difficult to trade. A lot of these guys, I don't know what their contract situations are, who's free agents, who's not. But you would think something's got to change, and that generally means, okay, front office member or coach. But I don't know that. I feel very strongly that the front office or the coach is not going to be back next year. So we'll see. That's a story for another day. Knicks Nuggets are on the way here on a Friday, Happy Hour Friday. I got some Happy Hour Friday picks for you as well. Stick around for those. I got some good ones. Went to a couple new spots the last couple of weeks, so I got those in the chamber for you today. More Sports Bash coming up, 97.3 ESPN. 432. Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. The news that just came down moments ago, Joel Embiid out for the season. That's not a surprise. So he will not play again the rest of the year. They don't tell us what's going to happen with him. He's going to see more evaluation, and he is physically unable to play. So you won't see Joel the rest of the year. That's it for him. Sixers tomorrow night. They take on the Warriors right here on 97.3 ESPN. That is a 8:30 tip-off. Let's go to the Nuggets today. Knicks Nuggets. Nick Earnshaw is host of the Shift podcast, and he is producer of the Locker Room Weekends on 97.3 ESPN. He's with me now for another edition of Knicks Nuggets. What's up, Nick?
Hey, Mike, what's going on? And, you just love a Friday news dump, don't you? You just absolutely love it. Something that you've already known for days, weeks, months, pretty much for a long time. So I think that's where we got to start with the breaking news nugget from the 76ers that Embiid is out for the year. Interesting that they wait for a Friday afternoon to do this. Everyone kind of already knew where they were at with Joel Embiid. So this is nothing new, nothing surprising. Fascinating that they want to wait for a Friday news dump to do this. But I want to kind of get into something interesting and looking back with the 76ers. And it's an interesting report that came out yesterday from Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report, and it revolves around Joel Embiid. And we just saw a massive trade take place just a couple of weeks ago with Luka Doncic. It shook the entire NBA landscape. There was always rumblings with the New York Knicks and Joel Embiid that would be a destination if he were to ask out for him. And Jake Fisher reported in Bleacher Report that the New York Knicks were a team that possessed interest in Joel Embiid over multiple occasions. And the 76ers obviously never pulled the trigger, and Joel Embiid never asked out of Philadelphia. And now you find yourself in this predicament. I think that story is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think the Sixers were ever going to entertain trading Joel Embiid, especially a year or two ago, 3 years, whatever. He always wanted to be here. He liked being here, and he showed no indication of wanting out. So there's also been this discussion ramping up because of that report. Should they have traded him to the Knicks or traded him elsewhere a couple of years ago? I just don't think that's realistic. They believed in him. He believed in the Sixers. Unfortunately, this is where you've ended up with some bad decision-making and some unfortunate events that have happened.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't even know what the Knicks, I did see something to that effect where, they basically said they were going to trade all their picks. Was that the one you're talking about?
Yes, correct.
To the Sixers in exchange for Joel Embiid. I don't know. I mean, this is the problem is the Sixers, according to reports, consulted with not one doctor, not two doctors, but multiple double-digit doctors to make sure that Joel was healthy and ready. And they were not told that you're going to have problems here. So at this point, you're looking at a guy who has been the MVP of the league. Whatever the Knicks were offering you doesn't seem that it would be commiserate with his output. Now, if you said, look, this guy just doesn't have it anymore, he's done, I don't think that anybody would determine. I know the fans out there think they know everything, but the guy was probably at his best season. He had a better year last year than he did the year he won the MVP.
Yeah.
So you're just going to dump him off for a couple of, the Knicks, by the way, went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. So what kind of picks were they really giving you?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't think it was realistic that he was ever going to get traded. And, the Doncic thing, it makes people wonder because of that. Can they make the comparison to Embiid? Should the Sixers have moved on and just traded him because of, he comes into the season unhealthy, right? Like he comes in out of shape, and then he has all these injury issues. Should they have just moved on and started over? I mean, it's a question you can always ask, but the guy was an MVP level candidate before he got hurt. He had 70 points in a game last year. Like he was ridiculous. And even this season, I mean, listen, he's played 19 games this year, averaging 23.8 points. He's barely played, but when he has played, I mean, he's made an impact. He made an impact in the Knicks series last year in the postseason. He dropped 50 with Bell's palsy and one knee. So, I mean, it's not like he wasn't productive. His body has just continued to fail him over and over again. He's a franchise cornerstone. You believed in him. You paid him multiple times, gave him multiple contracts, especially just recently. You believed in him. I don't know. Did they just not do enough due diligence in the offseason before they gave him that contract? Did they really think he was okay? Did they not consult enough doctors? Did they just kind of go in blind? It seems like they tried to check every box, say, hey, we're going to pay him this money. We believe in him. We think he's going to be healthy. It's not looking like the case. And I heard you bring up the article earlier from Marcus Hayes. And, they might have to take a chip of his bone out of his hip and then put it into his knee, do all these types of procedures. I mean, when you're getting to that point, you're getting to a level where it's like, man, is he even going to step on the court again, unfortunately? Because that's how much his body has failed him and his knees have failed him.
According to the Jake Fisher report, and Jake's a good dude. I talked to him yesterday.
Yeah.
He writes that Embiid has met with more than 10 doctors this season to try to figure out the best way to reduce or eliminate the discomfort and swelling in this knee. Now, we were told a couple, maybe last week or the week before, when we asked about the Olympics and why he did that. And it was, well, he had 12 different doctors essentially clear him to say that when he signed the deal, and that's what we were talking about, when he signed the extension and then played in the Olympics. How did that happen? Well, they said he got checked out by about 12 doctors who all signed off on him. So to say 12, Fisher saying 10 at least, that sounds like some due diligence to me. I mean, I don't know about you, but how many doctors do you get second opinions from? 12, 15? What are we going to go, 30 now?
You might have to. You might have to with him. I mean, with everything that's going on with him, I mean, it seems like nothing's been right. I mean, nothing's been right. Seriously. I mean, he's out for the year now. He hasn't played. He's played 19 games. Have they been right? I don't know. I'm no doctor, but it doesn't look like they've been right.
I'm not questioning whether they're right or wrong, but what are you supposed to do? Just say, I went to 10 or 12 different doctors and they all had the same opinion. So how do you, what do you do?
You don't give him a contract. That's what you do. You shouldn't have given him the contract. You should have waited this season out. Like I said months ago.
Yeah, but that's a whole.
Give it to him.
But here's the thing.
Because this is exactly what I was worried about. He was going to get hurt again. And then who knows? He's in his 30s now. He's getting older. He's a giant dude, almost 300 pounds on those bad knees. After last season, it's like, all right, maybe we should think about waiting to give him a contract. I will go find that Nuggets because, my goodness, I mean, you could have prevented the contract thing and not be stuck. Now you're really stuck with him in this contract thing. You don't know what his career is going to be like now, especially they're shutting him down. He's seen all these doctors. I mean, it's getting to a point now where it's like, oh, man, is he going to play and ever be healthy?
Well, if they chose not to give him that extension, he would have been playing this season as a free agent, essentially. And then you're saying, okay, now he's hurt, and maybe you would have got him at a discount. I doubt it, or risk losing him for nothing.
Or you could have traded him at the deadline. That could have happened, too. Because if everything went right, you could have probably moved on.
Not the way this season has gone with the injuries, though. Who's taking him?
Someone would. I feel like somebody would, and he wouldn't have been on a contract. So, you would have had the ability, maybe even.
You essentially would have been trading him to somebody else on a free agent deal, and he wouldn't have played. I mean, he hasn't played all year. I mean, he's played 15, 19 games. I mean, come on.
There would be a team that would take a chance on Joel Embiid. I guarantee it. But the injury problem is so bad. I mean,
it's easy hindsight, obviously, to say why'd they give him the extension? They should have never done it. And I might say you're right about that. I think the Sixers are saying, look, for all these people that keep saying he doesn't want to be here, he's going to ask out. He's never asked out. He's given no indication. He's our guy. We did right by him, and we approached him. The Sixers did what we want all of our bosses to do: appreciate the guy and say, you do a great job, here's more money. And now they got burned for it, and they're getting ripped for. The funny part is we ripped Josh Harris, and the guy made a business move that we all want our bosses to do. They said, you're our guy. We appreciate the work you do. We are going to approach you and give you the money that you deserve.
You could.
And now it's blown up in their face, and we're ripping Josh Harris for it.
You could have also waited to give him that contract extension until the season started.
I know. I'm saying, that's my point is because the Sixers, they did right by their guy. They're basically getting ripped for it.
In a sense, yes. But you also, if you're looking ahead to the future of this team, that's something you had to consider. Like, all right, let's see.
I don't know why they chose. I don't know why they chose when they did to approach him about the deal. I don't know how and why that was the time that they decided to do it. I don't know what played into them saying, you know what, let's go to Joel and approach him about staying here long term. I don't know if it had to do with there was a lot of this buzz from around the league that he might ask out or all this stuff, and they wanted to kind of put that to rest that, hey, he wants to be here and I don't know. It seemed like an odd time. I'll give everybody that. It seemed like it was unnecessary that they had to do it at that time because of the injury problems. It's more of the injury problems of why. It's not play related. The guy had the best season of his life last year, and that's including a season in which he won the MVP.
It's all injury related. The whole contract, everything's injury related with Joel Embiid. It stinks because he's what, top 3-4 talent in the league. I mean, he's unreal. He's an MVP level player. Unfortunately, he can't stay on the floor, and that's been the problem with them every postseason. It's like you're waiting for that notification from Shams or the 76ers. It's like, all right, do we get that Embiid out for the year, out for the postseason, out for the series notification, or out for at least game 4, 3, 2, 1? Like, you just were waiting for that notification, and it's so unfortunate because the guy's been nothing but great for the 76ers when he is healthy and on the floor. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah, and listen, I know a lot of people are so mad at Joel and they're frustrated with him. I just feel bad for the guy because he gets questioned a lot. As he said, I came back in the playoffs. I didn't have to play. I wasn't even ready to play, but I came back out there and played. He's played with he said it. And I do feel bad because I think he gets a bad rap. And unfortunately, the timing of his injuries are unfortunate for him. And listen, he's in a town where people judge you based on your availability, which is fair. But that guy has tried everything he could to get back out there with the amount of freak injuries that he has had. And unfortunately, his body has failed him. But that's what happens to 7'2" men. I mean, they are not. Listen, you're not supposed to be 7'2". You ever walk around Linwood, Northfield, Summers Point, Hamilton, Millville, Vineland, Cape May? You ever see a 7-foot man walking around your neighborhood? It's not normal. So guys of that size, and by the way, a 7-foot man that has the skills that he has to be able to play basketball, that's a freak of nature. He's a unicorn, that guy. And unfortunately, sometimes unicorns break.
Yep. And this is a perfect case of that. It's unfortunate. He's an MVP player, MVP level player. His body has just continued to fail him. Freak injuries, just unlucky. I mean, that's what it is. He's just extremely unlucky when it comes to injuries, his health. It stinks for Joel Embiid. Now, at least Paul George finally decided to wake up and cancel his podcast and take a break from it during this time. That was perfect timing by him to as soon as Joel Embiid gets shuts down. Paul George, good job. You're off your podcast now. You can focus on a championship as the tank begins, I guess, in a sense, for the rest of the season at this point. All right, moving along to nugget number 2. I want to talk about the Phillies today. And listen, Jesus Luzardo, pretty good day for him on the bump for the Phils. They beat the Red Sox 7-5 in their spring training game today. And we got to see Luzardo for the first time. 2 innings pitched, no hits, no runs, nothing earned, 2 strikeouts. And, it's an encouraging sign, Mike. And we talked about a little bit of encouraging signs yesterday until the postseason. But the pitching staff, I mean, this is a loaded pitching staff for the starters. Wheeler, Nola, Luzardo, Ranger, Sanchez. I mean, this is a legit pitching staff if they all stay healthy throughout the entirety of the season. Luzardo looked really good today. But it just makes you wonder if this pitching staff can stay healthy. They're going to need guys that eat innings here and there. What does it mean for Andrew Painter this season? I know all offseason we talked about it. Dombrowski's brought it up multiple times. that they want to see Andrew Painter this year. I mean, Mike, I think if they stay healthy, we'll live in the hypothetical world. Phillies pitching rotation stays healthy for a majority of the season. Are we really going to see Andrew Painter start that many games this year? I just don't see a spot for him at this point. Maybe out of the bullpen, but with Luzardo in the mix, Ranger, I just don't see it.
Hard to see right now, but I believe that not only will he pitch, I believe he will be impactful. What does that mean? I don't know. Does that mean he usurps Luzardo, Sanchez, Ranger? I think he's going to be pitching ahead of one of those guys. Probably not Luzardo. I liked what I saw from him today. He was throwing 97, 98. Yeah. He looked like he was back to himself. And when he is the best version of himself, he's probably the second best pitcher on this team right now. Luzardo, stuff-wise, even numbers-wise. I mean, his numbers in Florida, in Miami in 2023, when he was healthy, he was 208 strikeouts in 178 innings. That dude's got electric stuff. But I think the Phillies look at Painter as not just, hey, a number 5 guy. I think they look at him as a top of the rotation guy. And it might not be this year. I wonder, and we were talking about this with McGarry in the first hour, they want Painter to pitch now. Great. I want to see it too. Is that, hey, this year, be the 8th inning guy, just come in. You know, we've seen a lot of young pitchers come up late in the season, pitch out of the bullpen, give me your best inning that you got but don't discount if Ranger Suarez is up and down, he's a free agent. And if at the deadline they're ready to bring up Painter and Suarez hasn't really dazzled. Remember last year in the first half of the year, you could make an argument that Ranger Suarez was the Cy Young of the league. He was so good for the first half of the year. But if he doesn't show that he has bounced back, are there teams at the deadline going to say, hey, he's a free agent, you have a surplus, what do you want for Ranger? But I think Painter will figure prominently into the 2025 team.
I'm with you on the Ranger thing. You and I have talked about that before. The Ranger thing's interesting because of the contract. He has Scott Boras as an agent. You locked up a lefty, traded for Luzardo. You locked up Christopher Sanchez for a couple of years. You chose Sanchez over Ranger to give an extension to, right? So you locked up Sanchez. You have those two lefties, those two guys, right? And Ranger's a guy that I could see walking, and you could get some value at the deadline for, especially if he has a decent first half of the year. And what do we continue to complain about, Mike? The bats. Can they get another bat? Can they get another outfielder? I mean, how good's Max Kepler going to be? I guess we'll find out. I don't expect much from Max Kepler. Hopefully a little bit more than Austin Hayes. But Ranger's going to be the key to Andrew Painter, I think, getting starts. You go back to the Tampa Bay Rays of 2008, right? When team the Phillies beat in the World Series, David Price came out of the bullpen, then eventually turned into a long-time starter. So maybe that could be the plan for Andrew Painter, a David Price type of entry into Major League Baseball. And Mike,
yep, that would be what I would say is somebody, maybe 2 guys, because you're going to have 6. You generally only use 4. 2 of those guys come playoff time will have to get bumped to the bullpen. Do you have a rotation of Wheeler, Nola, Luzardo, Painter, or Sanchez, and 2 of those guys go to the bullpen? That would be interesting.
Yep, that's something to think about. All right, Mike, 2 pack of nuggets for you today.
All right, there you go. By the way, I'm looking at the free agent class of next season. And why am I doing that? Because who are guys that could be traded at the deadline? Could you say, hey, a Suarez for this guy type of deal? And you say kind of an unprecedented deal where you go free agent for free agent. And we don't need the pitcher. We need the hitter. You need the pitcher. You don't need the hitter. Something to that effect. 2 contenders trading with each other at the deadline. You don't usually see that. You usually see a team that's out of it trying to dump somebody. But you could see 2 contenders flipping guys. Keep an eye on that at the deadline. All right, Nuggets. See you later, man.
All right, Mike. I'll talk to you.
Have a good weekend. There's today's Nuggets. Nick's Nuggets here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. We'll do them again on Monday. And he, of course, will be on The Locker Room tomorrow with Billy at 10 a.m. right here on 97.3 ESPN. When we come back, it's Rye or Cy. Rothstein's back. Let's go. Here we go. Happy Hour Friday, everybody. All right, final hour of the show, Sports Bash Live. You heard the news. Joel Embiid's out for the rest of the season. We got a lot of stuff on that. Myles Garrett and, of course, the Eagles, all that news. Diana Russini basically saying that Roseman trying to make a big swing in some sort of move here. A lot of questions as to why Embiid, why the Sixers signed the extension when they did. Some thoughts on that. It's a lot of contractual stuff. It was kind of a bet, really. They were gambling, and right now it looks like they lost. But we'll explain a little bit more. I'll explain a little bit more. But a lot of people have asked, why did the Sixers even sign Embiid to that extension? There are financial reasons as to why they did it. Ryan Rothstein, another edition of Rye or Cy, some of the top stories that we'll take a look at right now on the Sports Bash Live on a happy hour Friday. Of course, a lot happening. We got the Phillies today. We've got the Sixers with the Embiid news, a little Friday news dump, but it doesn't pass the Sports Bash test.
Not up in here. Not up in here. Happy Friday, MG. Another edition of Rye or Cy. Happy to be here. So, all right, let's start with Embiid. We might as well finish the week as we started it, right? Let's talk some more Sixers. Dude, this is so 76ers. 24 hours ago, I think it was. This is a team that came out and said, we are not pulling the plug. We are not pulling the cord on a playoff push and Joel Embiid and blah, blah, blah. And here they are now. A lot has changed in one night. They slept on it or probably didn't get much sleep. Who the heck knows? And now Embiid's done for the year. Good move. I'm happy he's done. I posted, I think it's just a big collective sigh of relief across the Philly area, South Jersey, Delaware Valley, because now we don't have to, pose the question of will he or won't he play, MG? But it's just typical. They're flying by the seat of their pants.
I don't know I don't know if they thought like, hey, let's not play him, say that he's going through some stuff and see what the reaction is. If like the fans still want to go for the playoffs or not. Like, I'm just saying, like, I can't imagine that's the reason. But yeah, the noise was loud enough that the team should know that the fans are out on this year. They're out on this year. They're over all of this stuff. It's been a disaster. I likened it before to, this is like a WWE wrestler. You need to get him off television for a couple of months and then hope the fans are clamoring for him to come back because they haven't seen him in a while. That's your best opportunity here because the people are over Embiid. They're over the team. They're over this season. There's nothing you can gain from this season. There's no goodwill that's left in this year. The Sixers need this season to end. Unfortunately, you have all of March still to go, and then, of course, the last couple games in April. So you still have over 20 games left that you have to put a product out there. The problem is the fans don't care about your product. You should not want to win games. So this is a lost season. This news could have came a month ago, longer than that. But it didn't, and it come down today, and obviously on a weird time, Friday afternoon, when but look, it's 5 o'clock on Friday. The cars are filled right now, and people are here. Wait, what? Embiid's out? And I'm sure people out there are probably like, this season, it couldn't get any worse.
There's a part of me that it almost is hoping, and it's just crazy that I'm even about to utter this, but there's a part of me that's hoping that I've watched the last game of Joel Embiid as a Philadelphia 76er.
Yeah, see, there's no part of me that feels like that at all. Like, I feel bad that it's gotten like that for some people, and I feel bad for Joel that people have gotten that point. And listen, I'm not telling you how to react, and the people out there. I know people are tired of him. They're frustrated as hell. But I this team, and most teams, by the way, yearn to get a player of this caliber. And I know it's frustrating, but you will never get a player more talented or better than this guy right here. So if he has anything left in the tank, you have got to try to siphon as much out of him as you can.
I agree. I just don't believe that we have that guy anymore. I don't believe we have that guy. And I look at the toll that he has, the toll that it's taken on the organization, just him. It's exhausting.
I know.
Exhausting.
I agree. I agree. It's so frustrating, but sometimes, you put up with a lot when you have that person that you're willing to put up with it for. And for me, I'm not saying for you, I'm not telling anybody that they're wrong about this because you're absolutely right to be frustrated. But I have enjoyed watching Joel play so much that I would hate to see the Sixers pull the plug. And quite frankly, they can't pull the plug. He's making too much money. The contract is ridiculous for another team to pick up. So you have not seen Joel's last game. If he ever plays again, it will be in a Sixers uniform.
Sure. I would bet on that too. But like I said, it's just crazy that that's even a thought of mine. And I know I'm not alone. I'm probably speaking for the majority.
I'm not saying that you're on your own on that either. I think I'm in the minority on this one.
Sure. It's just been a horrible year, man. It's been
right, so. A lot of people have asked the question, why did the Sixers rush to sign him? Right? That's been the thing. Why? Why did they do this? This is an article that was written back in November from Brian Toporek, who has been on Josh's show a lot on Game Night. Brian is a guy who writes for Forbes, okay?
Okay.
So I'm going to read a little bit of what he says here, okay? He maps out why the Sixers made the decision to do this when they did, because a lot of people are saying, why? Why did you do this? Embiid had multiple years left on his current contract, but they only had until October 21st, which was the day before the start of the regular season, to sign him to an extension. Had they not reached an agreement by the start of the season, he would not have become extension eligible again until next offseason. Embiid was already guaranteed on his contract through next year, okay? So he was here through next year no matter what. He had a $59 million player option for the following year. So he's opted into that deal, right?
Yeah.
For $59 million. So that means he was here next year, 25, 26, and then 26 and 27, he was actually going to make more money under the player option than what they're going to pay him in 26, 27 anyway. So he could have become an unrestricted free agent in 2026, but he's not opting out of a $59 million contract under the health situation that he's in, is he?
No, absolutely not.
All right, so Toporek goes on to say, since Embiid had 2 years left on this current deal, he was only eligible for a 3-year extension, which is what the Sixers gave him. They gave him a 3-year extension. Had they waited, he then is eligible for a 4-year extension. And then if he decided to test free agency and the Sixers wanted to bring him back, he could have gotten a 5-year deal worth $345 million. So essentially the Sixers were willing to take the risk of giving him 3 more years at this price. So essentially they think they got him for less than market value had they not signed him when they did.
Yeah, it makes sense. They essentially saved money for the 26-27 season, and they avoided having to give him a super max or a max contract worth over, $300 million.
Right. So if he's healthy and he is, back, he was on a contract for next year anyway, no matter what. And if he's healthy this year, or if he's not healthy, now he's back next year, and then he's a free agent. You can't trade him if he's hurt, so now you're stuck with him anyway. And then you're at the point of now what do we do? Lose him for nothing? Mm-hmm. Or maybe he opts back into the deal. Now you're paying him $59 million as opposed to, I think he's getting $54 million that season. So they saved a couple million there. But I think it was more of a math problem for them and rolling the dice of saying, hey, we'll give him a 3-year extension instead of a 4-year extension and possibly a 5-year extension.
It was a good move. It was, I'm trying to think of the NFL, I think wide receiver. It's a perfect example. It was like if they gave him the money last year, if you don't give a star player the money as soon as possible and extend him as soon as possible, every year the market value just goes up. So you're always saving money the sooner you give someone a contract.
Yeah, but this is like a Howie Roseman move where you approach the guy early and say, I want to sign you and lock you up, but you're getting him for the price that you feel more comfortable with, as opposed to letting them get the leverage. And the Sixers, approaching Joel, I think felt if he outplays this contract, we now have won that deal. And it blew up in their face. Obviously, at this point right now, it is not a good deal for them.
Right, exactly. I think at the time they had the right idea, but they still had to be thinking even then, MG, about his injury history and his track record. It's easy for me to say now. Like, I'm not holding a lot of weight in what I'm saying because I know what I know at this point with hindsight. But I still feel like it was a massive swing and miss because they should have looked at the bigger picture and they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were looking at a financial picture rather than a picture of the risk. I think they were, they did look at risk because they were saying, look, we know there's some risk, but part of that risk is the financial issue of if we let him because if they waited till the beginning of the season, he wasn't ready to start the beginning of the season, and then you couldn't sign him to the extension. The extension cutoff was October 21st. So after the start of the season, you couldn't sign him to the extension. Now, let's say he plays the whole year and averages 35 points a game and he's the MVP. What's he going to say to you? I want more. I want 4 years. I want the 4 years. This was like the Ryan Howard thing. When the Phillies went to Ryan Howard, they figured, look, let's approach him now because down the pipeline, there's two reasons here. One, for the Ryan Howard thing, the Phillies approached Ryan Howard. They didn't have to give him that extension, but they said Albert Pujols, and there was a lot of first basemen that were free agents coming up, and they wanted to sign Howard before those guys got deals because they didn't want to. And if you remember, Pujols got a ridiculous deal, and the Phillies got Howard for under market value because they went to him first. The Sixers understood that the television deal was coming out, right? They got that $76 billion TV deal. So what does that mean? The salary cap's going to go flying up. So the Sixers approach Embiid before that happens and say, let's get him locked up before that deal comes in when the salary cap goes up, and we're going to have to pay him even more money.
Yeah.
So that's kind of stuff that gets lost in the sauce sometimes, whereas if you're a business owner and you're saying the salary cap's going to go up because we got more TV money, let's sign this guy now before we have to pay him even more.
Right, exactly. And at the time, like the evaluation of Embiid's health at the time was good. But like even at the start of the season, or let's go back to pre-Olympics, right? Like his knee was good. Everyone's like, he shouldn't have played in the Olympics. It's like, no, dude. The Sixers medical staff evaluated him. Multiple doctors evaluated him. Embiid said he was feeling good. The knee was cleared. He's cleared. Even at the start of the regular season, it was alleged that he was cleared this year. So it's like, once again, what the heck is happening and what has happened? It's crazy.
Yeah, listen, nothing has worked out since then. I mean, they signed him to the deal. He played in the Olympics. It didn't go very well. I don't think he didn't make much of an impact for the Olympic team. He got his gold medal. He'll always have that. But, everything that's happened afterward has been a disaster.
It's been a complete disaster, man. And I'm just happy he's shut down. They can put it past him. But no one's even really – I think everyone's relieved that they can just close this chapter of this season for the 76ers, right?
No question. I think, well, listen, the fans have closed the chapter on this season weeks ago. This season has been a disaster really for, months. I mean, going back to opening night when nobody was ready, they played 13 games together. 14. I think it's 14 games they ended up playing together. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and they're under 500. I think they're like 6-7 or 7-8, whatever it is together collectively. So it's bad. We'll see what they do, in the offseason. All right, I want to get to the Myles Garrett report. We touched on this throughout the week. Obviously, everyone's talking about it, media and Eagles fans and national, NFL fans. It has been reported by Diana Russini of The Athletic that the Eagles and Howie Roseman are expected to take a big swing on Myles Garrett. Now, I'm sure you've touched on this a lot throughout the show today already, MG. But to give you my point of view and, we can discuss and debate, I'm just curious, what does a big swing look like? And I said to you earlier in the week, and I'll maintain it. Like, look, I wouldn't be mad and stomping my feet if the Eagles were able to land Myles Garrett. That would be awesome. I love it. But I don't know if I want to pull off a big swing to land him. I want to know what is a big swing and is it worth it?
To me, it's a no-brainer. Look at the impact of when Saquon Barkley came here. This was one of the best players in the league at his position, playing for a lousy franchise. You have, I'm not saying one of the best players in the league. You have one of the best players at his position of all time. All time. Myles Garrett averages 15 sacks a season. He has double-digit sacks in every single year he has played except his rookie year when he only played in 11 games. He averages 15 sacks a year. Now, remember, you might lose Josh Sweat and Milton Williams. You got to replace them with something. And I stress this. Many people felt that the Detroit Lions were the best football team last year. One of the reasons why you never saw how you stacked up with them is they were decimated by injuries. Are they going to be decimated by injuries again this year? If they're 15-2 and have a home game and you have to go there, are you beating that team? I don't know. You had a road that you took care of. Green Bay, L.A., and a Washington team that, quite frankly, I don't think was ready for that moment. Washington, they got their quarterback. Now what can they do? They can start filling in around the quarterback. Finally, all these years they've been searching for a quarterback. Now they have one. Now they can focus in on the other areas. The Rams, they got Stafford back today. So now let's start building. We were one play away. Yes, the Eagles dominated the Super Bowl and the NFC Championship game, but let's not forget the Green Bay game and the Ram game were pretty darn tight for a while there. And all these teams are still getting better and better. They're coming after you. You've got to do something to improve your team. You can't just rest on your laurels.
Well, their laurels got them a Super Bowl championship, right? Like let's remember they're coming off a Super Bowl championship.
It did.
Right?
They were the best team in the league this year. But if you stay the same, are you going to be the best team again next year?
No, I'm with you. I don't want him to stay the same. I just think I want Howie to continue to operate as Howie, which is taking big swings, but it's calculated big swings mixed in with draft and free agency, right? And for me, it's like, okay, Myles Garrett's a stud. He's one of, if not the best edge rushers on planet Earth. He's also 29, 30 years old. So this guy's not getting any younger. And one of our benefits and strengths has been youth and developing from within and depth and team defense. And it's like, are we going to give up a lot, both short-term and long-term, for a guy that's about to turn 30 and may have already peaked? Right? Like, I think
I don't see, like, he had 14 sacks last year. I think he had 14 last year, he had 14 the year before. Yeah. I don't know that you're going to see a guy just completely fall off the cliff. This, to me, is a player who's still at the heights. And the way I look at it is this. You have a core of offensive talent that is here for at least another 2 years together. The Barkley, the Smith, the Brown, that offensive line. You should be pretty good, and Hurts, by the way. Yeah. They're all going to be together for like 2 years. On the defense, you've got Quinion and DeJean, and you've got Carter, and you've got C.J. Gardner. I mean, you've got a core group of guys over there. You have a 2 to 3 year shot with the core guys in their 20s. Go get the best player in the world at his position. And if you win another one or two in that window, I said this before, if you traded Nolan Smith, is Nolan Smith going to be a 14-sack guy?
No.
I mean, is he? Okay. Even if he becomes a 12, 14-sack guy 3 years from now.
Yeah.
The rest of the team might not be at their peak anymore. So he might be really good, but now he becomes like Myles Garrett, a really good player on a team that's just not ready to win a Super Bowl anymore. You got to go for it while the window's open with the best player at his position. And just think about what he would do for Jalen Carter. To me, having Myles Garrett next to Carter is more disruptive for Carter than it is to have Smith next to Carter.
I agree with that, man. Listen, it would be awesome and wild to see Garrett and Carter lined up next to each other. But I have pushback on the window of opportunity and winning now thing. that's the reality in professional sports. But I know that we have Howie Roseman, and I feel like, listen, this guy's going to be able to retool and rebuild and continue to pump out championship contending rosters, right? Like, why do we have to say it's only now in the next couple of years? Why can't it be the next 10, 15 years with a guy like Nolan Smith? You know what I mean? Like, that's how I feel about this Eagles organization at this point in my life.
It can. I mean, you're then discounting the fact that if they got a Myles Garrett, that somewhere along the line they don't find another Nolan Smith. I mean, remember, Nolan Smith was drafted with pick number 30. Though they're going to have a pick next year, most likely. What if that pick 30 is an edge rusher who turns out to be really good? They have Jalix Hunt, an edge rusher that they drafted that they like a lot. So that's not discounting that they still can't add talent. You know, they're not trading – it's not the Ricky Williams draft where they're giving up the entire draft for one player. They can still bring in talent through the draft to find a replacement for Nolan Smith. I mean, I like Nolan Smith a lot. He had 6.5 sacks last year. I don't know what I honestly, I can't say what I know that I have a strong feeling. Is he a 10 sack guy? Is he an 8, 10, 12, 14? I know Myles Garrett, every season of his career, he has double-digit sacks.
Is Garrett the priority in your mind, or for you, would it be the priority? Is it Zach Bond? Like, what's the current priority if you're Howie?
Well, you know, the report from Diana Russini today, which I thought was interesting, is what she said was that Zach Bond is essentially going to price himself out of the for the Eagles. And her quote was, there are a lot of teams in. Here's what Diana Russini said on the Scoop City podcast. Take a listen.
There are a lot of teams in on Zach Bond. I think he's going to be expensive for Philadelphia if they want to do it. I just think they may get outpriced there. So we'll see how that comes together.
So she says, I think that they will get outpriced on Bond. So if I lose Bond, I got to think that I'm also going to lose Sweat and I'm going to lose Milton Williams. And then at that point, that's when I take my swing.
Gotcha. Yeah, the Bond's interesting. I've maintained that the Eagles were not going to be able to bring back Bond. I've just always felt like another team was going to back up the Brinks truck for him, and it would be stupid to, match any offer of significance for Bond.
All right, Sports Bass Live 97.3 ESPN segment 1 down in the books. We got another one for you coming up here on the Sports Bass Live 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. Don't go away. We got more to come on Ryer's side today in the 5 o'clock hour. But first, I want to tell you about the Nizam's Indian Restaurant, Route 40, Egg Harbor Township. It's the number 2 ranked restaurant in New Jersey. A Friday night dinner, a weekend dinner, a Sunday afternoon lunch buffet. This weekend, make it the first weekend, if you haven't tried already, to try the Nizam's Indian Restaurant, Route 40, Egg Harbor Township. You can reserve a table, book the entire restaurant. They'll host your private party, your corporate event. Open 7 days a week, 11:30 to 9:30. They're offering a lunch buffet, 11:30 to 3. Visit thenizams.com for more information. All right, 5:30 on this Happy Hour Friday. So get some Happy Hour Friday picks for you as well. Visited a couple new spots last weekend, so I'll have the picks for you for Happy Hour Friday. What are you having on this Happy Hour Friday for this weekend? Let me know, 609-403-0973. What are you having this weekend? Give me some good picks, everybody. It's supposed to be like 60 degrees tomorrow. I want a little outside brewski. Where am I going to get a little outside cold one for tomorrow? I got one for the people out there. What I have last weekend? I got to go to my Untapped to find it for everybody out there. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Ryan Rothstein, of course, joins me in the 5 o'clock hour. Rye or Cy, we go through some of the top stories. I had the Alfie's IPA at Snouts and Stouts on Saturday out in Hamilton. It's a new spot. Took over where Vinyl was. Alfie IPA was the pick for the weekend. So if you get out that way, check them out there. Alfie's IPA. They had a bunch of little IPAs out there. A lot of the people I was with had a bunch of different things. Everybody was telling me they really enjoyed what they had. I was at the 3 Threes as well the other day. They got a couple new ones out there as well. I got to remember the name of the one that I tried out there. But all right, that's what I got for a little Happy Hour Friday. Just a little taster for you there. All right, there you go.
All right, I like it. Let's get back to Ryer Cy, MG. And Wheeler made his debut. He struck out 4 in 2 innings of work in a spring training outing down in Florida for the Phils. And it got me thinking, like, dude, Wheeler, and we talked about Wheeler the other day, but Wheeler's one of the more underrated, underappreciated, not only Phillies, but I think Philly athletes maybe of all time. And I think there's multiple Phillies, current Phillies. Aaron Nola, I think, is another underappreciated Philadelphia Philly, not just in the current landscape, but all time. So I figured a fun Friday topic for us could be, who are some of the most underappreciated athletes in Philly sports, whether you want to go current or all time? I have a lot of them.
Wheeler's interesting. You know, the story of Wheeler is interesting. When they signed, I say this a lot, but I'll reiterate it. You know, when they signed Zach Wheeler, how many people were excited about it? How many people thought when they signed Zach Wheeler, we are getting the best pitcher in baseball? When they signed Zach Wheeler, did you think this is a perennial Cy Young Award winner? Every year that he's here, he's going to be a Cy Young candidate. No, never.
No, never. I was like, okay, cool signing. Like, they just added an arm. Honestly, I felt like they added an arm. And it couldn't be furthest from the truth, to your point. I mean, he's a Cy Young dude every year.
Every year. He's essentially become the best pitcher in the National League, if not baseball. So you're talking about a guy that at the top of the rotation has been one of the best pitchers in baseball since the Phillies got him. But when he was with the Mets, I mean, you know, he always had injury problems. With the Mets, his number. Now, he's been with the Mets. He has been with the Phillies and the Mets the same amount of time, 5 years. All right?
Wow, that's crazy.
In 5 years with the Mets, he pitched in 126 games. With the Phillies, he's pitched in 133 games. With the Mets, he went 44-38 with a 3.77 ERA. I mean, he was solid. He was a good pitcher, nothing special. But, like, in Philly, he's 59-32 with a 2.94 ERA. And the big number, the whip here is 1.03. And in New York, it was 1.29, which isn't bad, but 1.0 is, like, elite. But the numbers here are, I mean, his WAR in Philly is 25.4, and in New York it was 9.1. Just head and shoulders a better pitcher here in Philadelphia. He has got to be way at the top of the list of underappreciated.
Absolutely. I mean, he never had an ERA in New York under 3.3. He never made an all-star game. He was never even in conversation of any type of Cy Young award. Like, it was a light switch flip for him when he came to Philly, and we're just reaping all the benefits. But I still feel like we don't, at times, view him as arguably, I don't know, the greatest pitcher in Philly's history, one of. Absolutely.
He's getting up there, man. I mean, only 5 years, so he's probably not ahead of like a Carlton when you're talking about more of the modern era, but he's probably, you got to probably say he's surpassed like Halladay, right?
Yeah. I mean, Halliday's a fan favorite, and his death, unfortunately, sort of puts him on another level. But yeah, I think it's fair to say Wheeler's pitched in World Series. So yeah.
Halladay was here 4 years, but numbers, he was 55 and 29 with a 3.25 ERA. Halladay, 1.1 whip. I mean, only 4 years. He had 3 really good years. His 1 year was horrible, and that's the one that he went out on in terms of his last season pitching before he ended up retiring. But his 4 years, his WAR 17, Wheeler's is 25. But I definitely think that with people just say off sight unseen, oh, Halladay's the better pitcher. But I think Wheeler has been the better pitcher.
Yeah, it's tough, though. I'm almost backpedaling a little bit now thinking about it. I mean, how much weight do you put into a perfect game? I think you should put a lot of weight into it, right? And then I'll say,
he had a Cy Young, too.
Yeah, if you had to pick one of those guys, pick one to win one game, I think I'm picking Doc.
Well, you can make a strong argument that the 2 seasons Doc had here, 21 and 10 with a 244, 19 and 6 with a 235, that those 2 years were better than any of Wheeler's years. Now, Wheeler has a better culmination of 5. The 2012 and 2013 seasons for Doc were not good. In 2012, he was 11 and 8 with a 4.49 ERA, and then his last year was 4 and 5 with an ERA of 6.82. So his last 2 years, he was not good. His first 2 years were better than any of Wheeler's years.
Yeah, and like I said, like throwing a perfect game, throwing a no-hitter in a playoff game, he gave the fans just all-time fan moments for the rest of to be eternity. You know, it's that's a big deal.
Yeah, no, like, you know, it's a really, because one pitch 4 years, one pitch 5. If you were to take Wheeler's first year in Philly, it was a COVID season. So you could essentially take that year. He only pitched 11 games because of the COVID. So if you went 21, 20, like 4 years versus 4 years, now the conversation becomes even more interesting. But I would say Wheeler's best season ever was last year, 16 and 7 with a 257. Now he led the league in WHIP, but Halladay's 2 best years are better than Wheeler's best 2 years. Wheeler just has a better his best 4 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, are better than Halladay's 4 years, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. Now, what about Aaron Nola? I mean,
Nola's on the high list of underappreciated. I mean, people I can't stand him. I'm ready to let him go. But keep in mind, he's a guy in Philadelphia who 3.70 ERA. His WHIP is 1.17. He's 104 and 79. And here's the big number for him. He never misses a start. He pitches every single. He's never hurt. I just don't think people don't value that because he's, he had the 1 year he finished 3rd in the Cy Young. He's finished 4th in the Cy Young. He was 7th. He's 11th. But, I think people, when he got 3rd in the Cy Young, people wanted that every single year. And when he wasn't that anymore, people turned on him.
Yeah, I think, we compared Doc to Wheeler. How about Cliff Lee to Nola?
I think Lee was probably, he was better
Cliff
than
Lee
Nola.
was more dominant, yeah.
Yeah, and I got to see how long Lee was, because he was
Not
here, then
long.
he left, and when he came back, he was here for 5 years, actually. So he's here the same amount of time. He was 48 and 34 with a 2.94 ERA with a 1.0 WHIP. So I would say in his 5 years, you could almost slide him ahead of Halladay.
Yeah, his best season was in 2011. Cliff Lee, he went 17 and 8 with a 2.4 ERA, a 1.027 WHIP, 238 strikeouts, 6 complete games.
But Halladay's 2 years were better than both Lee's and Wheeler's best 2 years.
Yeah, I think you could say Doc Holladay's, those 2 years were the best in Philly's history.
You're talking about,
And that's
you're going back to
without looking at Carlton, yeah.
Yeah, you're going even further back to some other guys. But in the, from the Carlton, from the 70s to now, you're looking at Halliday's 2 years, maybe one of Wheeler's years, a Lee year in there. Nola's Cy Young, when he finished third in the Cy Young, was really was a big year for him. But, I didn't realize Lee pitched here 5 years. And towards the end, he got bad too. His last year here, he kind of was up and down. But he had the big thing for Lee was when he got here in 09, he was so awesome, but his numbers weren't all that great. But he came out like a vengeance, and people just loved him, and then they traded him. And then when they brought him back, he was really good that first year they brought him back.
Yeah, I mean, that 2011 team, that was, one of the greatest teams ever, one of the biggest disappointments in Phillies history, probably Philly history, period. That 2011 team was unbelievable.
Oh, the 4 aces, no doubt about it.
Yeah, my goodness.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a good one. Do you have Nola in your top 5, like Phillies of all time, right? Because I saw something online. Yeah.
You mean pitchers?
Yeah, just pitchers, right? Like, is Kurt Schilling in there? You have to put Carlton. I think you have to put Cole Hamels. Or do you?
Hamels never really. He had like one really kind of like year where he like was in the Cy Young conversation, but he was more of like a stay. I mean, he had that the 08 playoff run was his signature, and that's similar to
that's good enough.
To Schilling.
Yeah, but
Schilling never had a year here where he was like a Cy Young, I mean, he had the 1 year in 97. He was 17-11 with 2.97 ERA. That's the best year that he ever had here.
Yeah, he went on to do obviously bigger and better things with Boston, with the D-backs, with Randy Johnson, but
But he spent 9 years here, which was the most he's ever played. And by the way, in Philly, he was 101.78 with a 3.35 ERA. I mean, so you could say that Schilling, over the 9 years, his body of work puts him in the conversation. Because quite frankly, the Phillies were limited for big chunks of their eras on starting pitching. So you could say maybe Schilling from that 90s era, and then you got Halladay for his 5 years, Lee for his 5 years, and then you're probably going to Wheeler and Nola. Those 5 for, if you want to go from like 90 to now and leave like the previous, like the 80s and 70s and 60s out of it and just go from 90 to now, it would probably be Schilling, Halladay, Lee, Wheeler, and Nola.
Yeah, and that's, the point of this convo. It's crazy, but the Phillies, they have 2 of their 5 greatest pitchers of all time right now going for them. So it's interesting.
I guess the other guy you could throw into the convo would be Hamels and where he fits around the 5 guys we just mentioned, because he was here longer than some of those guys. But I think 5 years is a good amount of time to say, hey, you're in the conversation. Anything less than that, although Halladay was only 4, so I guess 4 years. But he had 2 such impactful years.
Right, but you talk about impactful. Cole Hamels, the 08 year, that's enough. Like, that's enough.
Yeah, but no, Hamels was here longer than that.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying his impact for the World Series, that's enough for me to put him in the top 5. Like, many people would put Nick Foles top 5 greatest Eagles of all time simply because of the Super Bowl. I think that, that matters, of course.
Yeah, by the way, Cole Hamels in Philly, 114.90, 3.30 ERA. I mean, he had a year where he was 6th in the Cy Young, 5th in the Cy Young, 8th in the Cy Young, but he was never a real, had one of those just great years.
It's crazy. Hamels, his best year as a Philly was in 2011.
Yeah, 14-9, 2.78 ERA, a 0.9 WHIP, which is really, really good. The next year he was 17-6 with a 3.05. I mean, he had some but he never had that he never led the league. I mean, he led the league in WHIP once, but he never led the league in wins or ERA or strikeouts or anything. He was always just a notch below the Cy Young candidates.
Yeah, he's one of 2 World Series MVPs in the history of the franchise.
You could say, Schilling got them to a World Series and was pretty, big on that 93 team, but you can maybe say you would take Hamels over Schilling.
Yeah, I would. I absolutely would. The shilling for the Phillies version of shilling of 93 versus what, '08 Hamels? Yeah, I would take '08 Hamels, I think.
Yeah, well, you win it, and he's the MVP of the NLCS and the World Series.
Right, right. That he was just that stretch was dominant, legendary.
Yeah. All right, there you go. A little Friday stuff for you there. Good stuff, good fun on a Friday. By the way, Jesus Luzardo looked pretty good today. Had his first start for the Phillies. 2 innings, couple strikeouts, looked pretty good, hitting the gun at 97, 98. That is Rye or Cy. All right, man, we'll see you Monday.
All right, have a good weekend.
All right, Sports Bass Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. Do me a favor, if you're driving around in the car, download the free mobile app. You can listen on the app on your phone as well. It's powered by our good friends at First Bank of Sea Isle City. If you are somebody who watches the show and you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button because when we go live, you'll get an alert to let you know the show is live. If you're on the X platform, formerly Twitter, at Mike Gill Show, it'll give you an alert when we go live, and you can watch the show on Twitter X. So there's a lot of ways to get us. Follow us on the TikTok platform. Our guy Nate is on the move. He's got all the clips from the show on Instagram at 973 ESPN. There's a lot of ways you can, if you miss a show, you can go back and watch it on YouTube or on X. So a lot of people say, hey, where can I missed the show today. I missed football at 4. You can go back and watch it on YouTube. You can go back and watch it on the X platform. We got you covered. All right, I gave you a Happy Hour Friday pick. It was the Alfie IPA. I had that at Snouts and Stouts in Hamilton the other day. Nice new spot. I enjoyed it. I had a couple over at 3 Threes. I had a new one over there because normally when I'm at 3 Threes, I usually drink the same beer, but I did try something different. I just don't remember the name of it. I'll find it. I'll go to the menu here. Somebody sent me a good one. I'm going to try this one out, and they sent me a picture too. I love when you give me the picture. He says, Mike, this is your next summer IPA. Instant top 5. It is a tone wood. It is called Powder Days. That looks pretty good there, George. Got to tell you, I like the picture. The picture tells me the story. Thank you for that submission for today's Happy Hour Friday. I'll get the name of that new one from 3 Threes, and I had another one over at Sopo the week before that I tried and tasted, and I'll give you that name. Stick around. Happy Hour Friday plus Bet365 play of the day next. All right, time for the Bet365 play of the day. Plus, I got a couple of Happy Hour Friday picks for you guys out there. Before we get out of here, how'd we do last night? What's the updated standings?
Mike went 0 for last night.
Oh!
You might have seen Steph Curry went 56 last night, so the Magic had no chance of covering that number. And then the T-Wolves, they could not cover at all against the Lakers last night as well. So the good news is, though, you're 117, 82-1, and it is only the second losing day of 2025.
Unbelievable. I'm going Celtics tonight against the Cavs. These guys are the two heavyweights in the East. I like the Celtics tonight. They are 15-0 against the spread since 2021 when they are not a 4-point favorite when they are coming off a night where they did not play. So they're in that spot tonight. They never lose in this spot. I like the Celtics against the Cavs tonight. That is my Bet365 play of the day.
Just one?
Just one today.
I mean, there's a full college basketball slate this weekend.
Too much going on. I got the beers here, all right? People want to know what my picks were for Happy Hour Friday. I've been giving too many plays out for the people.
Well, I mean,
what's my record?
People took all these picks, 117, 82-1. They could buy all the beer they want.
Yeah, 117, 82-1. I made people enough money. Here's what you go out for a Happy Hour Friday. I told you I was at 3 threes on Saturday last week. Back to reality, always a winner, but they have a new IPA called Retro Wave. It's an 8%er, so don't drive. I enjoyed it, though. The Retro Wave, in fact, they were telling me, everybody goes there for back to reality, but they said a lot of people are trying the Retro Wave, and they actually kind of like that one more. I do know people were trying some other things because I'm generally an IPA guy, but a lot of people were drinking this peanut butter jelly time. Not for me, but I was told by others that was pretty good. Over at Snouts and Stouts, which is a new spot in Hamilton, I had the Alfie's IPA. I also tried the Purebred, and the Great Dane. I like them both. The Purebred's a little softer. The Great Dane is a hazy IPA. It's an 8%er, so I only got a little guy on that one. But the Alfie's IPA was my play there. My buddy, he went with the what did he have? Oh, Dog Life, the lager. Dog Life, it was called. So that is a couple Happy Hour Friday plays. Good spots out there. Oh, I forgot to look up the Sopo one. Well, you can always get Flake News over there. It's always a solid win for the people out there. Have a great weekend, everybody. Happy Hour Friday. Be safe.